Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. He had studied both occultism and alchemy, but he had never seen the runes being drawn by the coaching team. Su Guantong whispered, "Is it black fog crystal?" "That's right. Powdered black fog crystal." Fang Heng nodded. He could also sense that the ink used to draw the patterns was infused with powdered black fog crystals. The Federation was certainly willing to invest. Soon, the runes on all 7 people were completed. Everyone, the preliminary preparations are complete. Next, you will use modified special game cabins to enter the game and carry out the next tier of cultivation. As Benny spoke, he gestured with his hand. Staff members from the coaching team brought trays to each trial player. Fang Heng picked up the blue jade key placed on the tray. "This is your trial key. Use it to enter the game and begin the next stage of the trial. Everything is ready. Let's begin." Fang Heng and the others exchanged glances and turned toward the row of game cabins lined up at the back of the hall. The game cabins looked hastily dismantled, with large bundles of wires connecting them to a central transfer instrument. Zaka swallowed nervously. Something about this felt sketchy. "Well, we're already here. Might as well give it a shot." Zate muttered and followed the staff's instructions to climb into a game cabin and close the hatch. Fang Heng nodded and followed suit. Ding. Detected that the player possesses the awakening key of the ancient sages. Ding. Would the player like to use the key to enter a special area? Yes. Ding. The player has entered an unknown high-tier sequence world. Ding. The player possesses psychic abilities, and the level is above high tier. The player is immune to this world's special negative effects. Ding. The player already possesses the Awakener rune. Ding. The player is now in Awakener trial mode. Death in this environment will not be permanent and will not consume a death count. The player will automatically revive. Fang Heng slowly opened his eyes, quickly scanning his surroundings. It was dark. It felt like he was standing in a void. The ground beneath him formed a solid black circular domain, and beyond that was pure darkness. Fang Heng quickly released his perception. There didn't seem to be any immediate danger. He reviewed the in-game prompts again. What exactly was the Awakener trial mode? Was this a new special world? Fang Heng noticed that most of his skills were currently inactive. As he thought, Zaka and Su Guantong's group entered the space one after another. Su Guantong checked the in-game information, and her expression subtly changed. She quietly warned, "Everyone, this isn't just a trial space, it's one of the highest-tier special game worlds. Extremely dangerous. Be careful." As she spoke, specks of dim light began to flicker and gather in the space. "Everyone, welcome to the trial ground. You now exist in a very special form, we call it the spiritual consciousness state." It was Benny's voice. The players all looked up and around, but Benny was nowhere to be seen. His voice echoed through the hollow space. "Let me explain the requirements of this trial. While in the spiritual consciousness state, you will be attacked by forces within this trial world. The goal is to endure as long as possible. Although death in this state will not be permanent, it will cause significant mental trauma that will take time to recover from. So, try not to die." Chapter 2865, Spirit Body. As the voice fell, everyone's heart skipped a beat at the same time, and they immediately felt a heavy force of mental strength pressing down on them. It was somewhat similar to the coercion they had felt from Benny not long ago, but slightly weaker in intensity. At least they still had enough strength left to control their movements. "They're coming." Everyone heard Fang Heng's reminder and looked up. Strands of pitch-black shadows gradually condensed around them. The shadows slowly condensed into human forms, forming a circle, and began moving toward the group. Were these special monsters in the special game world? They didn't seem too strong. Fang Heng sensed the monster's strength and tried to take a step forward. Then, he suddenly burst forward and threw a punch straight ahead. Bang! A muffled thud. The shadow figure crossed its arms in front to block Fang Heng's punch, stepping back several steps in a row. Seeing this, Fang Heng frowned. Something was wrong. That punch lacked damage. It didn't have the impact he was used to from previous collisions. The problem wasn't with the shadow creature, it was with himself. Had he been weakened? Fang Hang raised his right hand in front of him and slowly clenched it into a fist. It was different. He was no longer in a fully physical form, but rather a fusion of consciousness, which meant his attributes had changed. While he was thinking, the rest of the shadow creatures also began moving toward the players. Zaka held his breath and focused his spirit, cautiously stepping back a few steps. As the shadows entered attack range, a black long blade suddenly appeared in his hand, and he quickly slashed toward the shadows. Bang! With a slash, Zaka's expression suddenly changed. When the blade hit the black mist of the shadow, it produced a forceful rebound. The shadow creature advanced instead of retreating. Its right hand formed a palm and struck heavily on Zaka's shoulder. Boom! Zaka took the hit and was sent flying backward uncontrollably, slamming into a formless barrier behind him. His body gradually disintegrated and completely vanished from the space. Buzz! Zaka was actually one-shot killed by the shadow creature. The remaining players looked warily at the shadow creatures gradually materializing in the Great Hall. Earlier, watching Mr. Fang handle the shadow creatures so easily had relaxed them, but after seeing what had happened to Zaka, they no longer dared to be careless. Outside, in the real world, although the internal situation couldn't be seen, some game data was exported through the modified game cabins and decrypted by the control device, then projected onto a big screen. Sir, the trial has begun. We are currently maintaining the energy level stably at level 18. A military officer sent by the Federation's military department frowned and said, Professor Benny, isn't level 18 too high for the initial energy level? Level 18 is the precise value obtained through testing. It's a foundational critical point. Starting from that point, trial participants will experience a qualitative increase in the efficiency of triggering their central potential during battle by absorbing the power of the black fog. Beside him, a researcher nodded and explained, under an initial strength of level 18, the body can most quickly adapt to the power of the black fog core. Of course, we don't deny that doing this carries great risk. The researcher held a notebook and, while checking the data inside, continued, research has confirmed that with strength stimulation above level 12, if a player dies, they may suffer trauma in the spirit. This mainly shows as decreased control over spiritual abilities, and in rare cases, even permanent decreases in spirit attributes. The higher the energy level, the stronger the side effects. But at the same time, the better the results. We are currently testing to find a suitable training level and black fog energy supply level. These mercenaries are a good group of test subjects. As the researcher was explaining, a nearby training game cabin suddenly lit up with a red indicator. Several researchers immediately stepped forward and opened the game cabin, carrying out the pale-faced Zaka, and began running diagnostic checks on the spot. Report, all data is normal. He's just a bit weak. Mental strength damage needs further detailed testing. It's still too forced after all. Benny shook his head and waved his hand, take him to rest first. Yes. Benny looked back at the control panel and said, Sergeant, I know this approach is a bit aggressive, but we don't have time. Some risks must be taken. Right now, the world humanity lived in was being gradually devoured by the black fog. The upper echelons of the Western District Federation believed that cooperating with the spawns might help temporarily slow the spread of the black fog. But humans didn't want to bet everything on the spawns. Humans had never been ones to yield easily to other races. To deal with the coming crisis, the Western District Federation disregarded repeated warnings from the Central Federation. The entire military department directly took action, dispatching elite forces to attempt unlocking the final lock. Preliminary human experimentation results were mediocre. Normal levels of energy stimulation had little effect on the lock. Even after meeting basic attribute requirements, only 0.07% of subjects completed the unlocking, and even then, it took a long time, with many suffering permanent mental damage and spiritual attribute weakening. That's why Benny has been working on optimizing the training method for breaking the lock, hoping to promote it throughout the Western District Federation and improve the strength of its soldiers. When he heard that a new group of mercenaries wanted to begin the lock training and some were even willing to volunteer as high-risk test subjects, Benny personally came to conduct more aggressive tests. Even though it was extremely dangerous, it was a sacrifice for all of humanity. Besides, they had signed voluntary agreements and accepted the consequences. As Benny thought, the shadow creatures in the game successively defeated players, and the game cabins in the hall began to open one by one. Sir, take a look at this data. Huh? Benny looked up at the screen, a flash of surprise in his eyes. The energy concentration in the trial environment was gradually decreasing. Level 12 strength represented the intensity of the shadow creatures in the trial, which would exert spiritual pressure on the trial participants, helping them absorb the energy of the trial environment. But energy wasn't generated out of thin air. It came from the Federation converting black fog crystal cores. Every bit of energy consumed a corresponding amount of crystal cores. The energy diffusion level represented how fast crystal cores were being consumed. Too much would waste them, but too little would reduce energy concentration and drastically lower player training efficiency. Normally, level 12 shadow strength matched with level 8 energy diffusion. Why wasn't the diffusion keeping up? Was it because this was the first time these people entered the trial, so they absorbed the black fog's aura more easily than normal? While Benny was thinking, the overall energy concentration dropped again from 70% down to 60%. Chapter 2866, Energy Diffusion. Benny nodded and said, "Continue, enhance the energy diffusion level to level 10. Yes." As the black fog level increased, the environmental concentration gradually began to stabilize. Benny continued to look up and observe the values on the screen. It seemed that the remaining 3 people in the trial had already become familiar with level 12 combat. Interesting. He hadn't expected them to last so long on their first entry into the trial space. Was it that player named Fang Heng? That kid was indeed quite unusual. During the initial test, Benny had already sensed that his spirit attribute was strong and that he had some resistance to psychic powers. He had likely studied psychic disciplines. In addition, he had a special talent. Benny narrowed his eyes. He had always wondered why would powerful spawns be willing to cooperate with humans? After a deeper understanding, Benny gradually realized the reason. Part of it was for utility. The spawns were extremely wary of the Black Fog game and generally unwilling to actively engage with it, choosing instead to recruit other races as vanguards to fight on their behalf. There was also another important reason. Humans possessed a unique advantage that other races did not. A one-of-a-kind talent and an exceptional capacity for learning. Benny said in a deep voice, "Increase the trial level." Understood, raising the environmental trial level to level 15. Inside the Black Fog trial world, Fang Heng had quickly gotten used to the upper limits of agility that this body could achieve. Surrounded by several shadow creatures, he repeatedly dodged, occasionally blasting a punch to drive the enemies back. It was certain. Inside the trial, his attribute strength was closely related to his foundational spirit, as well as academic disciplines such as the occult, psychic science, and elemental science. Since that was the case, Fang Heng sharply seized the opportunity, dodged the shadow creature's attack, and threw a punch. His mental strength instantly condensed into his fist, exploding with several times the usual damage. Bang! The shadow creature shattered with one punch. As expected. Since he was a product of gathered mental strength, using mental strength condensed into his fist could unleash even higher damage. Fang Heng swept a glance around him. In just a short moment, there were only Su Guantong and Wayne left in the hall besides himself. The 3 gathered together, back to back, fending off the approaching shadow monsters. All 3 were players inclined toward the spirit type. However, Wayne and Su Guantong's spirit attributes were far inferior to Fang Heng's, which made things especially difficult for them. No wonder the previous test was focused on mental strength. Without enough mental resistance, there was no point in joining the trial. "Mr. Fang, Su Guantong, did you notice? The black fog is gradually merging into our bodies." Only then did Fang Heng notice that during the battle, faint auras from all around were unknowingly entering his body. Ding! The player has absorbed Black Fog strength. Current Black Fog strength absorption rate, 0.1%. Ding! Current mission triggered Awakener. Mission name, Awakener. Mission description: you have accepted the trial of the Awakener. Please refine your spirit will during combat and absorb and fuse with the power of the Black Fog. Reach an absorption rate of 100% to complete the awakening. Current Black Fog strength absorption rate, 0.105%. Black Fog strength? Fang Heng's heart stirred. So the glimmering particles around them were part of the Black Fog strength? Fang Heng immediately tried using perception or mental strength to actively absorb or capture this Black Fog strength. However, it was ineffective. The glimmering Black Fog strength remained unmoved. Su Guantong and Wayne also received the game hint shortly after. They looked at each other and tried to absorb the Black Fog strength. No use. This power can't be actively absorbed. I tried several methods, but none of them worked. What about you guys? Yeah. Looks like the absorption method of the Black Fog is completely different from any energy types we've seen before. As they spoke, the surrounding space suddenly flickered. The environment seemed even darker. The shadow creatures became slightly more solid under the influence of the dark aura. They slowly moved, shambling toward the center of the domain where Fang Heng and the others stood. Whoosh! Only 10 meters away, one of the shambling shadow creatures suddenly burst with speed, transforming into a blur in the air, rapidly pouncing toward Fang Heng. Fang Heng met it with a punch. Bang! Their fists collided with a muffled sound. Fang Heng staggered back several steps, and the Black Fog was blasted backward again. Whoosh! 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 Several shadow creatures launched attacks at Fang Heng and the others from all directions. Fang Heng could still manage on his own, but with two teammates at his back, things became increasingly difficult. Mr. Fang, we're backing out. Good luck. Su Guantong and Wayne had completely fallen behind. They exchanged a glance, realizing they had become a burden. They nodded at Fang Heng and closed their eyes, directly exiting the trial. As the two exited the game, the number of shadow creatures instantly dropped by 2/3. Fang Heng immediately felt a huge reduction in pressure. But the shadow creatures were still extremely difficult to handle. Relying on his superior agility, Fang Heng swiftly weaved through the shadow creatures, occasionally striking back with a punch. Each attack was enhanced with mental strength, instantly blasting the shadow creatures to pieces. He could still hold on. Outside the game, warning lights lit up on Wayne and Su Guantong's game cabins. Two staff members quickly stepped forward to help open the cabin doors. No need. I'll do it myself. Su Guantong's face was a bit pale. She raised a hand to stop the nearby researcher, intending to stand up. What? Su Guantong gripped the handrail inside the game cabin and tried to lift herself, but suddenly discovered that her right hand had no strength at all. What was going on? Su Guantong was shocked. She hadn't suffered any damage inside the game, so why did her body feel so weak? Seeing this, the two staff members stepped in to help her up from both sides. Su Guantong turned to look. Wayne was in the same state. His face was haggard, and he only managed to stand up with the help of two researchers. There's no need to panic, this is a normal reaction after cultivation. Benny waved his hand, signaling for the research personnel to take the two away. We'll conduct a detailed physical examination shortly. There won't be any issues. Benny looked back at the data on the screen, his expression becoming heavy. Everyone had exited the trial environment except for Fang Heng. The overall trial intensity was level L8, yet the energy diffusion had already reached level 32. Currently, the environmental concentration still maintained about 70% stability. So the problem lay with Fang Heng. He was absorbing the black fog energy far too quickly, in massive amounts. Benny said, report the mechanical operation status. Mechanisms have completed self-check procedures. No alarms detected. The machinery is operating safely. No issues found. Benny glanced again at the top of the screen showing Fang Heng's current black fog strength absorption rate. 3.88%, not an exaggerated number. In fact, at level 18 trial intensity, after half an hour, that number was a little low. But the amount of black fog energy he had absorbed was anything but low. It was hundreds of times more than an ordinary player. That meant Fang Heng's strength was incredibly high. Chapter 2867, Anomaly. The last time he had seen such an exaggerated scene was with that terrifying woman. Charlene. Charlene was even more exaggerated than Fang Heng. Are all these freaks specialized in mental strength? Benny murmured softly to himself. In fact, this was going to be troublesome. The difficulty of unlocking for them would be dozens or even hundreds of times higher than that of a normal person. For example, Charlene still hadn't completed her unlocking until now. Report. Environmental energy has dropped below 50%, now below optimal absorption state. Benny said in a low voice, continue increasing energy level. Instructor, our currently exchanged black fog crystal core reserves are running low. If we continue to increase the energy diffusion level, the effect duration may not exceed 10 minutes. Is that so? Swallowed all of it in one go, this deal is a total loss. Benny muttered to himself, feeling that in terms of devouring energy, Fang Heng was even stronger than Charlene. He let out a chuckle, a sharp glint flashing through his eyes, then raised his head and said, increase the energy level, and also raise the intensity level every 30 seconds. Let's test his limit. Let's see how long you can hold on. Yes. In the space, after realizing that the shadow creature was rapidly getting stronger, Fang Heng quickly readjusted his tactics. He suddenly realized that since the mission target was merely to absorb black fog energy, it meant he might not need to actively attack, he just had to avoid being hit and survive. Whoosh. Whoosh whoosh. The shadow creature's lust for attack was growing stronger, and its movement speed was increasing rapidly. After dodging several attacks, Fang Heng was forced into a corner. Trouble. The reality was not as simple as he had thought. Once he stopped attacking, a new shadow creature would appear every 30 seconds or so. More and more shadow creatures appeared, and the space left for him to dodge became smaller and smaller. Fang Heng quickly leaped a short distance to the side while checking the game hint. The current absorbed black fog energy point had reached 4.87%. Whoosh! A sound suddenly came from behind his head out of nowhere. He couldn't dodge it. Pa! Fang Heng was forced to turn and punch forward, gathering his mental strength onto a single point on his fist. Boom! The shadow creature was shattered instantly under the heavy punch. At the same time, Another shadow creature on the right took advantage of Fang Heng's brief pause and transformed a black long sword in its hand, sweeping it across Fang Heng's body. Kai. The tip of the long sword sliced a narrow wound across the lower right side of Fang Heng's abdomen. Huh? Fang Heng immediately sensed something was wrong. The wound didn't bleed but instead emitted a black fog-like aura form, and his HP dropped sharply. That much damage? Not good. What's worse, his undead effect had failed. Though his HP was still recovering, the speed was extremely slow. Compared to his long health bar, the recovery speed of just a dozen points per second was a drop in the bucket. Whoosh! Fang Heng leaped back again, murmuring, "Spiritual body." In the special game world, it existed in a form similar to a spiritual body, so the damage it received was also in the form of spiritual damage. Even though there was HP, the HP was actually a converted display of spiritual state. The slowly recovering HP was actually just his slowly healing mental strength. Whoosh! Whoosh! The shadow creature's speed increased again and was rapidly closing in on Fang Heng. Fang Heng didn't think anymore and quickly dodged. The power of the shadow creatures was increasing at an alarming speed. Fang Heng frowned deeply. He dared not trade HP with the creature and quickly moved along the edge of the space, teleporting. He couldn't dodge. Fang Heng's pupils shrank. Secondary space projection. Dots of spatial strength enveloped him as Fang Heng quickly entered the spatial projection. The shadow creatures inside the entire space lost their target and simultaneously paused. Using the projection, Fang Heng quickly escaped the encirclement of the creatures, his brows still furrowed. Inside this special space, using spatial projection came with pressure hundreds of times greater than in the outside world. At the same time, his HP began to drop slowly, and the absorption of black fog energy was also suspended. No, he couldn't stay in the secondary space projection too long. Fang Heng stepped out from another side of the space. Several shadow figures immediately locked onto him and rushed over. Looks like this trial could only end here for now. Although he still had his two big moves, Everlasting Moon and Tree Realm Descent, both ready to be used, he didn't want to waste the cool down here. Besides, he could guess that using such moves would drastically consume mental strength, his HP. No need. Exit. Fang Heng took one last glance at the mission completion rate, then quickly closed his eyes and shouted loudly. Whoosh! In the next instant, Fang Heng directly disappeared from the special game environment. Ka. In the hall, the game cabin opened with a clack, indicating the player had exited the trial. For a moment, the entire hall fell silent. Trial difficulty as high as level 36. A terrifying guy. He almost broke Charlene's monster record of level 40. The test personnel gathered around immediately rushed up to help. I'm fine. Fang Heng reached out and climbed out of the game cabin, jumped in place twice, and stretched his body. He was still more used to his own physical body. Thinking this, Fang Heng closed his eyes again to resense the state he was just enduring the game. This trial had been an experiment. Besides improving proficiency and energy absorption, his control over mental strength seemed to have become more condensed. It was his first trial, and he didn't yet fully understand the trial environment or the shadow creatures. If he were given another chance, he was sure he could last longer. Fang Heng opened his eyes again and suddenly found everyone in the hall staring at him with that same kind of looking at a monster expression. What? Gulp. The assistant instructor swallowed hard, looking at Fang Heng in disbelief. He stuttered, Why you? How do you feel? Pretty good. Fang Heng shrugged, then asked with some doubt, What's wrong? The atmosphere in the hall was eerily silent. Everyone looked toward Benny. Benny said, What are you all standing around for? Begin physical status check. Yes. Several researchers immediately came forward to conduct a basic scan on Fang Heng, and expressions of shock gradually appeared on each of their faces. This was actually. His body showed no anomalies. His state was so good that he could immediately begin the next round of trials. Report, all of Fang Heng's indicators are normal. A member of the teaching group looked at the report, eyes full of surprise, and handed it to Benny. Benny was equally shocked in his heart. He took the report from his subordinate, glanced at it, then looked up and stared closely at Fang Heng. Just what was this kid's background? When the spiritual structure entered the game, the damage received in the game was returned to the body in a multiplied form when the player exited the game. Chapter 2868, Physical Body. Therefore, after one trial, most players were exhausted and even needed to soak in nutrient solution for several days before they could return to their optimal state. Ordinary players either focused on cultivating their physique or their spirit, but the difference wasn't huge. After all, the total attribute value was only around 200 to 300. At most, a gap of about 100 points was the limit. So for them, the backlash from cultivation wasn't too severe. Just like Wayne and Su Guantong. But for the top-tier players, the stronger they were, the more terrifying their overall attributes became, possibly reaching 4 or 5,000 points. The gap became huge in comparison. Especially those freaks who maximized a single attribute. Like Charlene. Charlene focused entirely on cultivating her spirit. Her abilities in the spiritual system were terrifying. Even he admitted he was no match for her. The first time Charlene entered the trial and cultivated for 60 minutes, he forcibly interrupted her at the 27th level. After leaving the game cabin, Charlene immediately fell into a coma and only gradually recovered after resting for a month. This kid. Everyone had been prepared to begin emergency treatment. But he turned out to be completely fine. In Benny's opinion, there might have been only one reason. His stamina level and psychic force level were about equal. No. Judging by the relaxed expression on his face, his stamina level definitely far exceeded his spiritual level. His psychic force was already so terrifying his stamina was even stronger? Where the hell did this monster come from? Instructor. Feng Heng looked around at the strange atmosphere and couldn't help but break the silence, looking at Benny. I feel great. There's no need for a full body check. We can continue. Several assistants shook their heads and smiled bitterly at Feng Heng's words. Don't try it again. This time, all the black fog crystal cores that were brought were used up. Benny was silent for a moment, then said, there's no rush, Feng Heng. Your body condition is rather special. Special? Simply put, the difficulty of unlocking is related to the player's strength. After reaching a certain level, the stronger the player is, the harder it becomes to unlock. Benny explained, your strength is among the top of all players. The energy density you absorb is hundreds of times that of a normal person. So your consumption alone is equivalent to hundreds of people. Feng Heng frowned, looking a bit doubtful. What did he mean? Was he complaining that he consumed too much? Old man, are you trying to raise the price on purpose? Feng Heng tested the waters by asking, Instructor, you mean I need to pay additional contribution points? That's not the issue. We're currently short on materials. What materials? Black fog crystal cores. Feng Heng's eyes lit up, and he pulled out the 2 black fog cores he had previously obtained by destroying the pillar of the game from his backpack. Instructor, are these enough? Oh? Benny saw the large and small cores in Feng Heng's hands, and a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. I didn't expect you to have high-grade black fog crystals. They can be used for a while. It can let you try again and increase your mission completion rate by 4%. But it's still far from enough to complete the trial. Alright. Feng Heng said as he put away the black fog cores. I understand. So what do you want me to do next? Wait. Since I've promised to help you with the lock cultivation, I won't go back on my word. We'll find a way to obtain more black fog crystals, but it will take some time. In the meantime, if you're interested, you can also help us find some black fog crystals to speed up the process. Benny paused and added, also, you should have realized this too, the stronger the player is in the game, the harder it becomes to unlock the lock. What you experienced was only the mid-stage of the trial. With your current condition, as the completion rate of absorbing the black fog energy increases, your absorption speed will gradually slow down. If you want to progress more smoothly in the future, you'll need to cultivate in fields like mental strength, psychic studies, occult, elemental science, and other related disciplines. Feng Heng thought for a while. Alright. Then start with Grandmaster level psychic studies. Psychic ability greatly enhanced the spirit body, and the spawns already had available skill books. He just needed to collect enough contribution points to redeem them. It was just that Captain Oren had run into some trouble. Before the mainframe communication network was repaired, it was temporarily impossible to exchange ores for materials. He considered changing locations. The Federation probably had more than one mission point for mercenaries. Also, the black fog crystal cores weren't easy to get. Running all over the world to find the pillars of black fog was troublesome just thinking about it. Better to let the Western District Federation figure something out. Feng Heng. Benny looked at Feng Heng, who was deep in thought, and said, if you don't mind, I have a proposal. Would you like to hear it? Oh? Feng Heng looked at Benny. What is it? There's an advanced game battlefield. We really need people to join. Unfortunately, the strength level of ordinary mercenary players isn't enough. And due to trust issues, we don't want to let them in. But you're different. Benny stared at Feng Heng. You're very strong. I can personally vouch for you to enter that game world. You can obtain contribution points faster there and exchange them for black fog cores. The only condition is you must promise me that everything you see and hear in that game must stay secret forever. You mean exchanging black fog cores directly from the game? Feng Heng narrowed his eyes, recalling the suspicions recently shared by Archbishop Wolf from the Holy Court. Bishop Wolf believed that the one secretly spreading the black fog across the world was the Western District Federation military itself. If the Federation could exchange black fog crystal cores directly from the game, did that mean they had already mastered the way to open the pillars of black fog? Benny didn't answer, he simply looked at Fang Heng. Alright, I agree. Good. I'll personally help you fill out the application. It'll be approved within 2 hours. In the meantime, I'll have someone take you to rest. For safety reasons, we still need to do a simple body check. Benny waved to a soldier beside him, watching as Fang Heng was led out of the hall. A trusted subordinate walked up beside Benny and said, "Instructor. Have the background checks been completed?" "We ran comparisons. There is no record of a person named Fang Heng in the data archive." The soldier stepped forward and said, "Based on facial recognition, height, fingerprint, iris scan, and blood sample, Fang Heng does not match the World Lord from the Eastern Federation at all. But the lab has some feedback." "What is it?" "I brought the person to report to you in person." As he spoke, the soldier gestured toward the door, and several others led the head of the research department from Star Map Control Headquarters into the hall. Chapter 2869, Destruction. "Sir, when we were conducting the blood test, we found something strange in Fang Heng's blood. It seems to have been completely destroyed, with almost all the information being corrupted, rendering it undetectable," the supervisor from the research department said, handing over Fang Heng's blood test report. He added, "The blood is in a disordered and broken state. We've never encountered this before." Then he took the test report and flipped through it casually, asking, "What do you think caused this?" "The testing process was carried out by us, so we can rule out the possibility of the sample being interfered with during the extraction. This must mean that Fang Heng's blood was originally in this state. It could be due to his special bloodline talent, or perhaps his blood is inherently unbalanced." The supervisor shook his head, showing a helpless expression. "Sorry, I can't make a definitive judgment." Fang Heng's expression remained calm as he watched the researcher draw 2 more vials of blood, carefully placing them into the core device for preservation. "Hey. Blood tests." Fang Heng smirked slightly. He remembered that his blood had once been detected by the spawns for traces of the seed of Ouroboros, which led to them targeting him for assassination. So this time, Fang Heng was cautious. During the extraction of his blood, he had deliberately sabotaged it, ensuring that the blood lost all its energy and became little more than water in terms of appearance, aside from the color. With his mastery of god-level necromancy, achieving this had been a piece of cake. After the blood samples were taken, the lounge door opened. 2 soldiers entered, their faces showing respect. Fang Heng had been personally recommended by Benny, so the soldiers were careful not to neglect him. "Mr. Fang Heng, your elite-level mission application has been approved. Currently, a group of soldiers from the forward troops is heading to the advanced game world for an operation. Would you like to join the game now, or do you need to rest a bit more?" Fang Heng stood up from the chair and walked up to the 2 soldiers. "No need for rest. Let's go." Fang Heng had originally planned to bring Arkley and the others along for the advanced game, but after returning, he found that most of the players who had participated in the trial had suffered cultivation-related injuries and were currently recovering in nutrient solutions. They wouldn't be ready for some time. He had no choice but to act alone. "Alright, please follow us." Led by the 2 soldiers, Fang Heng passed through the Star Map Headquarters North District, where the mercenary team had been stationed, and entered the South District of the building. In the hall on the 6th floor, a team of 120 Federation elite soldiers was already lined up, fully equipped and ready for action. An army officer saluted Fang Heng. "I am Igor, the commander of the Federation's 9th elite team. Mr. Fang Heng, you have been personally recommended by Instructor Benny as an elite-level warrior. You will be joining our team as an advisor for this mission. Once in the game, you will have autonomous action rights and will only answer to the captain. No one else can interfere. Do you understand?" "Understood. Thank you for your cooperation." Igor nodded and gestured for the team to enter the game cabin. Ding. The player is entering a special game world. Ding. The player is using a special ritual to enter the advanced game world. Ding. In the current state, the player cannot open any space passages in the game. Using restricted items to forcefully open a space passage may cause extreme instability, leading to passage collapse and item destruction. Ding. The player has the seed of Ouroboros at level 4. The player is immune to the negative effects of the current world. Ding. Some items in the player's backpack are restricted from use. Fang Heng slowly opened his eyes and scanned his surroundings. The soldiers around him continued to enter the game. It seemed to still be aboard a ship. A new game world. From the hints, it appeared that the seed of Ouroboros was again involved. Igor was the last to enter the game. He checked the numbers and nodded at Fang Heng. "Mr. Fang Heng, please follow me." The squad moved into the ship's equipment area, where they began changing into tactical suits and equipping energy beam weapons. Igor left briefly with 2 soldiers, then quickly returned and gathered everyone. He announced loudly, reconfirming our mission target. We're heading to the C-29 sector to assist with clearing the insect nest from the side. Got it? Yes. Igor looked at Feng Heng. Mr. Feng Heng, we just learned that the captain is leading the Federation forces at the front line. We've been assigned an urgent mission to clear the insect nest from the flank. Will you stay here or join our squad for the front line battle? Feng Heng thought for a moment and nodded. I think I'll stay and observe. Igor nodded and replied, all right, here is your identity card for the ship. Please keep it safe. The main ship area is to the right. You can find the mainframe there to accept suitable missions. Feng Heng watched as Igor and the soldiers hurried off, then made his way to the main ship area. Along the way, Feng Heng noticed that there were very few soldiers on the ship. The internal defenses seemed unusually weak. Entering the main ship area, Feng Heng found the mission mainframe. Welcome to the main starship, ID number 283A. You are now connected to the Spawn Star Map network. As he activated the mainframe, a series of mission prompts appeared. Ding. Verifying identity. Ding. Player identity, Feng Heng, ID, 23,777. Ding. Player honor level, new recruit, F, level, 1. Players team, 271 star system, humans. Players team honor level, inferior, S, level, 1. Ding. Completing missions provided by the Spawn Star Map network will reward the player with experience points and Federation contribution points, which can increase the player's honor level and improve the team's alliance level. Ding. The player's identity has been verified. The player can now use their ID across the Star Map network. Feng Heng quickly skimmed through the prompts. It seemed that when he was aboard Captain's orange ship, he used the Federation's exchange column, but now that his identity was verified, he had unlocked the Spawn's exchange column. The items available for exchange were divided into 2 categories, personal and team. The previous exchange column on the Star River ship had corresponded to the Spawn's team exchange column. The difference between the two was minimal, except that the battlefield contribution points required for exchanges had now switched to Spawn's contribution points. The personal exchange column had few items available, mainly basic recovery potions and a few items that increased basic attributes. It seemed that his honor level was still too low, as upgrading it would unlock higher tier items. Feng Heng quickly checked again. While potions might be invaluable to ordinary players, they offered little to him, as he had developed resistance to them. Even if he exchanged everything, it would likely only increase his basic attributes by 2 to 3 points. Better than nothing. Chapter 2870, Accumulating Resources. The Grandmaster level Psychic Advancement book still existed among the team's exchangeable items. In addition, the contribution points of the Spawn seemed a bit harder to obtain, and exchanging for one only required 20 million contribution points. Unfortunately, the current contribution points of the Spawns were 0, so it couldn't be exchanged for now. Looks like the battlefield contribution points from the previous game couldn't be directly shared with the Spawn's contribution points. There hadn't been any discovery yet of where to exchange for a Black Fog core. It might be under the personal exchange category, still not unlocked. Feng Heng pondered and switched to check the missions issued by the ship. Annihilation missions. Unlike most previous resource-type gathering missions, this time the missions provided by the Star Map mainframe only included 3 types: destroying mutant worm nests, killing elite level and above mutant worms, and gathering energy ore. Gathering energy ore gave very few contribution points. It was estimated that the ship wasn't in much need of energy ore. Feng Heng thought for a moment and carefully checked the exchange options again. Good, there were multifunctional combat shovels available for exchange. However, this game world didn't seem to have other mercenaries. All entrants were official teams from the Western District Federation, so the energy ore mining work was likely already being done by federal teams. Could he go help? Might be a bit slow in terms of efficiency. He decided to try. First, he needed to accumulate some resources. Feng Heng casually took more than 20 multifunctional combat shovels provided for free nearby and walked to the ship's automatic transition device. He left the ship through the transition passage. After leaving the ship, Feng Heng made a light surprised sound. A hive-like fortress with a diameter of up to 3 kilometers stood ahead. It had an alloy skeletal structure. The scales appeared transparent and were probably some kind of defensive barrier. Inside the fortress, prisms stood in rows, each prism surrounded by faint yellow dots of light, forming independent prism defense networks. Defensive barrier, Feng Heng murmured softly to himself. He had thought it was just a simple ship, but now he realized the ship was actually docked inside the defensive fortress. Feng Heng tried taking a few steps forward. Since he possessed an identity card, he wasn't recognized as an invader. As he approached, The defensive barrier ahead automatically opened an arc-shaped passage for people to walk through. Feng Heng directly pulled an energy crystal hoverboard from his backpack and left the spawn's defensive fortress. Passing through layers of defensive barriers to the outside of the fortress, Feng Heng slightly furrowed his brows. The air was filled with light red spores, making the outside world appear to be covered in a layer of pink mist. Feng Heng tried extending his hand to perceive. The spores were also a special ability of the mutant worms? It didn't seem dangerous. Whatever. He would mine first and accumulate a wave of resources. Feng Heng quickly opened the survey map. At present, 99% of the entire world had already been explored. There were thousands of scattered danger zones with mutant worm nests, but the only region truly classified as SSS-level danger was a still unexplored black area. As for the periphery of the black region, it was densely packed with danger zones resembling black dots, huge clusters of worm nests. However, it seemed the worm nests didn't show signs of actively attacking. Was it dangerous? It seemed a bit different from Benny's description. Feng Heng quickly headed toward the nearest mining area shown on the map. Along the way, he didn't encounter a single mutant worm. In less than an hour, Feng Heng arrived at the mining area. No one? A bit unexpected. Not a single person could be seen in the entire mining area. There were signs of previous exploration in the mining area, but the Federation seemed to have lost interest in it. Feng Heng extended his perception to confirm, then pulled out a stack of sealing rune papers from his backpack. Bang! Bang bang! Lickers quickly leapt out from the exploded sealing runes. After landing, they condensed flesh cocoons, transforming into zombie clone form, struggled out of the cocoons, walked over to Feng Heng's side, picked up the combat shovels, and began searching for mining points to collect ores. Some of the lickers used the stealth skill to dig into the ground, preparing to open a return passage to the Federation ship. Feng Heng thought for a moment and began controlling all zombie clones from the previous world to self-destruct. For now, he would focus on this world. Grind a wave. Next, it was just a matter of waiting. Once the zombie group was fully revived, he would first mine a large batch of energy ore to exchange for points and solidify his foundation. After finishing the zombie self-destruction task, Feng Heng lifted his head and looked to the right. There was still some time before the zombie clones revived. He couldn't just wait around. He would go check out the worm nest situation. Feng Heng directly transformed into bat form and quickly flew toward the nearest worm nest marked with a D-level risk rating. After flying at high speed for 20 minutes, Feng Heng furrowed his brows. Found it. The ground ahead was covered with a black-brown sticky substance. It resembled the creep from the Death Realm and the Nest of Disaster. However, the disaster in the Death Realm was red. In this world, the root-like tumor bulges on the ground were much smaller in size compared to the Nest of Disaster in the Death Realm, but their density was at least double, almost one every few meters. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! Huh? Just as Feng Heng approached, he suddenly raised his eyebrows. What? Dark green orbs suddenly sprayed out from the uneven mouth parts of the tumors. They could attack proactively. Feng Heng was surprised and immediately dodged sideways, dropping from the air to resume human form. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! The tumor's attack speed and frequency weren't low, and they had a slight projectile lock-on effect. And the attack range was very far. Almost at the same time, the tumor-like creatures gathered on the ground continuously released skills. A large number of orbs flew straight at Feng Heng. Too many. He couldn't dodge them all. Whoosh! Feng Heng furrowed his brow and directly entered secondary space projection state, dodging all the orb attacks and rapidly approaching the tumor creature rooted in the ground. Here it came. As he stepped out of secondary space projection, Feng Heng clenched his right fist and punched forward. Bang! The tumor-shaped nest of disaster instantly exploded. Ding! The player killed the mutant worm nest offshoot creature, Plague Mother. Before Feng Heng had time to check the creature's detailed information, another wave of dense orbs quickly chased after him. He immediately switched to Sacred Study. Buzz! A holy shield instantly activated around Feng Heng. Bang! 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 The orbs bombarded the outer defense. The newly activated defensive barrier quickly shattered. Such high damage. Feng Heng was struck with realization, and a glance at the damage numbers confirmed it. The orb lock-on ability was limited, and the speed was just fairly fast, but there were a lot of them. Their damage was high. Under the area coverage ritual-like attack of numerous orbs, getting hit once would cost a big chunk of health. If an ordinary player encountered this, they'd probably die after 3 hits. Of course, to him, the damage was still far from threatening. With the undead effect, he could tank it. Whoosh! Feng Heng's figure quickly flashed forward, dodging most of the orb attacks. While forcibly tanking some, he charged toward the next Plague Mother. Chapter 2871, Rock Armored Gun Worm Bang. One punch. He smashed another plague mother to pieces. While minimizing the attacks from the nest of disaster, he smashed the nests one by one with his fists. The efficiency was a bit slow. And there were still no rewards from the kills. Fang Heng thought silently. It would take a long time to completely clear this insect nest domain. Huh? Suddenly, Fang Heng raised his eyebrows. Just beside the spot where he had cleared the last plague mother, a new one was born on the creep. Did it have rapid growth ability? At this rate, he couldn't keep up. Maybe there was some kind of core deep inside the insect nest? If he destroyed the core, could he wipe the nest out completely? But if he tried to force his way in, he would be bombarded by an even denser stream of orb attacks. Taking tens of thousands of hits per second, even his undead body might not be able to hold up. It seemed that solo combat was too risky. He still had to rely on his zombie clones to gang up and grind through. At the very least, the life diversion talent of the zombie clones needed to activate so that he could withstand the thousands of orb impacts. What was that? Just as Fang Heng was thinking of a strategy, his perception picked up a large number of mutant worm body creatures approaching from a distance. He frowned and retreated, looking out toward the horizon. Kai. Across the creep-covered ground, a large swarm of black-brown, armored mutant worm bodies crawled rapidly toward him. They were here. Mutant worms. They were a kind of mutant worm he had never seen before, somewhat like land turtles, with spiked and jagged turtle shells on their backs. Yet they weren't slow on the creep. Fang Heng stepped back a bit more, staying just outside the plague mother's attack range, preparing to lure the mutant worms out to fight. Unexpectedly, the creatures didn't chase him too far. They quickly stopped and curled up on the ground, raising their thick turtle shells in a defensive position. Huh? Fang Heng was briefly dumbfounded. What was this supposed to mean? Whoosh. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The next moment, red fireballs shot out from the holes in the turtle shells. In an instant, a dense barrage of fireballs rained down toward him. What? Fang Heng was caught off guard. Unlike the dark green orbs launched by the plague mothers, these fireballs had stronger tracking capabilities. Damn it. These mutant worms could attack from a distance. It was the first time Fang Heng had encountered ranged mutant worms. Unprepared, he took a small hit. Seeing the wave of orbs about to explode all over him, he didn't dare take it head-on. He quickly took a step forward and phased into a secondary space projection, narrowly avoiding the attack. Boom. Boom boom boom. The ground where Fang Heng had just stood was instantly blasted by thousands of orbs, leaving deep craters. Whoosh. Fang Heng stepped out again from the secondary space projection, keeping a safe distance from the swarm. The enemy's ranged attacks temporarily stopped. It seemed the turtle-shelled mutant worms couldn't attack while moving. As he pondered this, the turtle-shelled mutant worms began to move again. Some of them exited their defensive state and crawled quickly forward, closing some distance toward Fang Heng before curling back into defense. Another group followed from behind, doing the same, moving past the first row and then curling up again to set up position. Repeating this process, the swarm slowly advanced, forming a solid defense line across the creep-covered domain. Well. Trench warfare, huh? They even had tactical formation? Fang Heng immediately understood the worm swarm's tactical intent. He smirked, then stepped into the secondary space projection once more, rapidly closing the distance to the swarm. The swarm had no ability to attack across dimensions. Once they lost their target, they remained in place. The front line seemed to think the danger had passed and came out of their shells. Boom. The next moment, Fang Heng appeared right in front of the swarm. As he stepped out of the secondary space projection, he swung his great holy sword. A large group of the nearest mutant worms were sent flying, instantly killed midair, and blown into clouds of blood mist. Buzz. The holy ripple effect triggered by the great holy sword spread out in all directions. Bang. Bang, bang. The surrounding turtle-shelled mutant worms that were touched by the ripple at close range also exploded instantly. Ding. The player killed the rock-armored gun worm. Ding. The player killed the rock-armored gun worm. Ding. The player killed. A flood of game prompts filled Fang Heng's retina. So these things were called rock-armored gun worms. While moving, their defense was weak, so weak that even the holy ripple could instantly kill them. But when the ripple hit those in their entrenched state, their exoskeletons seemed to absorb the attack. The gun worms were deeply rooted into the ground, completely unaffected. Whoosh. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. While entrenched, the rock-armored gun worms launched a new round of dense energy cannon fire toward Fang Heng. He dodged back into the secondary space projection once again. Boom. Boom. Boom boom boom. The impact zone was engulfed in another wave of cannon fire. More and more rock-armored gun worms gathered from behind the creep, releasing an overwhelming number of energy orbs. Even Fang Heng began to worry if he could withstand such terrifying, Concentrated firepower. Relying on his spatial abilities, he dodged most of the damage, then charged back into the swarm for another attack. Open. Fang Hang swung the great holy sword once more. Bang. A massive portion of the entrenched gunworms were hit, sent flying, and shattered midair into blood mist. However, their numbers didn't decrease. They were only growing. After several probes, Fang Hang figured things out. Entrenched rock-armored gunworms couldn't move, but their raised turtle shells had a powerful damage reduction ability, especially against ranged attacks. They had some resistance to melee damage, but it wasn't significant. They could still be one-shotted by the Great Holy Sword. Fang Hang glanced at the swarming entrenched gunworms behind the insect nest and quickly retreated again. He had gathered enough intelligence on the monsters. Solo farming was inefficient and dangerous. But Fang Hang flipped his wrist, revealing a thick stack of rune paper. Time for the clones to get in on the action. Come. He flung the rune paper forward. Bang. Bang, bang. A swarm of lickers leapt out from the exploding runes. Over 200 zombie clones appeared in the line of sight of the rock-armored gunworms. Whoosh. Whoosh whoosh. Before the cannons could fire, the lickers had already pounced from all directions. The swarm seemed momentarily stunned, pausing their attacks for a full second before resuming their long-range bombardment against the licker horde. Chapter 2872, Give it a try. Boom. Boom boom boom. The artillery shells exploded on the swarm of bugs, dealing massive damage and sending the lickers flying backward with each explosion. Even so, the firepower from the rock-armored gunworms couldn't kill the lickers. With the talent bonus from life diversion, Fang Hang's speed surged once again. He charged straight toward the densely packed front rows of the insect swarm, braving the incoming firepower. At the same time, he flung out another stack of runes from his hand. Bang. Bang. The lickers that emerged from the runes immediately plunged into the rear ranks of the rock-armored gunworms. As soon as they approached, the lickers launched a melee attack. Their claws slashed the armor of the rock-armored gunworms, leaving narrow, long cuts. The formation was immediately thrown into disarray. At the same time, some of the lickers in the rear disappeared into the ground, using their stealth skill. Beneath the rock-armored gunworms that were constantly firing artillery, strange movements began to occur. Bang. Bang bang. The ground suddenly exploded. The lickers sprang out from the ground, charging at the rock-armored gunworms in their setup state. In their setup state, the rock-armored gunworms had extremely high armor and some damage reduction, but they were up against the lickers, which had high strength attributes. Coupled with the lickers' armor-piercing claws, the usual licker output was often insufficient when dealing with elite-level creatures, but when it came to normal mutant worms like the rock-armored gunworms, they were no challenge at all. A few regular attacks were enough to destroy the rock-armored gunworms' defenses. In just a short while, the entire line of rock-armored gunworms was scattered. Hey! Fang Hang sneered inwardly. The evolved lickers were much more useful. Their stealth skill perfectly countered the rock-armored gunworm's special abilities. Without stealth, it would have been hard to break through the firepower of the rock-armored gunworm's defense line with just the lickers. Kai. Kai Kai. As the lickers continued to emerge from the ground and attack in waves, the firepower of the rock-armored gunworms was spread out, causing chaos across the lines. Whoosh. Fang Hang lightly tapped the ground with his toes and charged deeper into the rock-armored gunworm swarm. Changing tactics. Fang Hang transitioned from being a damage dealer to supporting the licker group by drawing fire. The concentrated fire from the rock-armored gunworms immediately targeted Fang Hang. He dodged the attacks he could, and for those he couldn't avoid, he tanked them directly. With the life diversion effect, his health stayed at a healthy level despite the bombardment. Meanwhile, the lickers in the rear were less disturbed by the artillery fire, and the speed at which they slaughtered the rock-armored gunworms increased. Ding, your zombie clone, fused with licker form, has killed the rock-armored gunworm. Ding, your zombie clone, fused with licker form, has killed. Fang Hang's retina started flashing with notifications. The kill efficiency had greatly increased. The number of rock-armored gunworms was rapidly decreasing. Here they come. Fang Hang rushed into the deeper parts of the swarm and noticed a few elite-level, larger rock-armored gunworms. In general, the leader-level and elite-level mutant worms had larger bodies and darker colors than regular ones, making them easy to identify. In their setup state, the elite rock-armored gunworms had faster firing speeds, and their artillery had improved in both strength and range. The fusion artillery fire rained down on Fang Hang as he stepped into secondary space projection. Whoosh! When he reappeared, Fang Hang was already in front of an elite rock-armored gunworm. Boom! Fang Hang's great holy sword came crashing down. The elite rock-armored gunworm was struck squarely by the massive sword, exploding into a cloud of blood mist. Ding! The player has killed the rock-armored gunworm, elite mutation, gaining 20 spawn contribution points and 20 honor points. Ding, the rock-armored gunworm, mutated, has been detected, and a modification branch option is available for the player. Modification branch option, concentrated creature artillery. Description: the cannon extends from the zombie clone's back. When in the setup state, the cannon enters a lock-on attack mode, allowing the player to target enemies within a specific range. While in the setup state, the creature cannot move but gains an additional 50% to ranged defense and 20% to physical defense. Additional note, this modification requires Deep Crimson Crystal 150. It's a ranged artillery modification. Fang Heng's mind stirred. The rock-armored gunworms probably shared the same origin as the seed of Ouroboros, so they triggered the modification option. Fang Heng quickly opened the skill menu to check the details. Great, the lickers could also accept this type of modification. In that case, the artillery skill modification would completely make up for the licker's melee-only weakness. But what exactly were the Deep Crimson Crystals? Fang Heng furrowed his brow. Another prompt appeared. Ding. The player needs to kill elite level and higher creatures to collect genetic data and activate genetic modifications. Current genetic acquisition rate, 0.07%. Alright, let's put the Deep Crimson Crystals aside for now. The priority was to activate the modification skill and then check for further details. Fang Heng raised his head and began to approach another elite rock-armored gunworm. Bang! The elite rock-armored gunworm, unable to move in its setup state, watched as Fang Heng quickly closed the distance and smashed it into a blood mist with his giant sword. Next. Fang Heng's gaze swept across the battlefield, looking for the next elite target. Under Fang Heng's leadership, the licker group slowly pushed deeper into the worm nest. After nearly half an hour of grinding, the number of rock-armored gunworms rapidly decreased. The reinforcements that arrived were nearly wiped out. Had they finished? His genetic collection mission wasn't complete yet. Fang Heng furrowed his brow, leading the licker group deeper into the worm nest, smashing the dense plague mothers along the way. Soon, a large, 4-meter-tall insect nest emerged from the ground. What was that? The mother spider of the nest? Thud. Thud. The giant red insect nest pulsated rhythmically, as if nurturing some powerful life force. Occasionally, rock-armored gunworms detached from the nest, landing and quickly entering setup mode. The area around the nest was already covered in a dense defensive line of rock-armored gunworms, with 2 commander level 1s also present. Hey! Perfect timing, just the right amount of genes. Charge! The rear lickers, relying on their stealth skill, emerged from the ground and directly broke through the defense line set up by the rock-armored gunworms, launching a surprise attack from below. The ground cracked open as the lickers shot out from the gaps, rampaging through the defense line of the rock-armored gunworms. In an instant, the swarm surrounding the nest fell into chaos. Chapter 2873, The Frontline Whoosh. Fang Heng flashed to the side of the mother spider's nest, and the great holy sword in his hand swung again. Bang! The mother spider's nest was heavily wounded, violently twitching and contracting, with a number of damage numbers in the hundreds of thousands popping up above its head. Some more. Fang Heng swung his great holy sword once more. Bang! 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 Under Fang Heng's consecutive attacks, the mother spider's nest shook violently, its flesh and blood constantly bursting, and large chunks of blood and flesh from the outer layers gathered and fell off. What was this? Under the falling flesh and blood, a petrified, crystal-like texture was exposed. At that moment, Fang Heng suddenly realized that the mother spider's nest wasn't just a large body. It was more like a conglomerate of fungal bodies, parasitically attached to a giant red crystal about 3 meters high. Whoosh! 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 The mother spider's nest suddenly shook violently, and its wounded body quickly began to grow and regenerate. Fang Heng glanced at the health bar of the mother spider's nest. Wow! That's one long health bar. Moreover, a significant chunk of its health that was just reduced was quickly recovering. Looks like it has the same self-healing ability as the seed of Ouroboros. No problem, it was manageable. The output is still keeping up. Kai. 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 The group of lickers quickly wiped out the mutant worms surrounding the mother spider's nest and rushed to attack the mother spider's body. The mother spider's nest had an extremely high HP but lacked defensive and countermeasures, letting the lickers continuously attack it and slowly whittle down its health in combination with Fang Heng's attacks. Bang! After spending 5 minutes, Fang Heng finally worked with the licker group to deplete the mother spider's nest's health entirely. The fungal bodies attached to the red crystal exploded, and large chunks of black blood and flesh fell off, revealing the deep crimson crystal that had been encased inside. Without the mother spider's nest providing a source of energy, the surrounding fungal blanket quickly receded. Ding! The player has killed the mother spider's nest, D-level, mutated leader. The player gains 500 contribution points and 500 honor points for the spawn tribe. Ding. The player has successfully cleared a D-level nest. The player gains 3,000 contribution points and 3,000 honor points for the spawn tribe. Done. Fang Heng stowed the great holy sword and carefully approached the red crystal to examine it. The red crystal stood about 3 meters above the surface, with a larger portion buried underground. It was emitting heat. It looked like some kind of special energy ore? Fang Heng was puzzled, reaching out to touch the crystal. Ding. The player has related skills. The player discovers the mineral, Deep Crimson Crystal. Ding. The player can use the mining skill to extract this ore, Deep Crimson Crystal. So, this was the material required to upgrade the licker's ranged attack ability. Fang Heng glanced at the mutant worm corpses around him and immediately understood. Perhaps the seed of Ouroboros relies on fusing with the power of the Deep Crimson Crystal, which allows the mutant worms to evolve into ranged attack forms. Thus, the evolution of zombie clones into ranged artillery would also require the Deep Crimson Crystal. He would need to figure out a way to extract the Deep Crimson Crystal and transport it back. However, this world is unique and doesn't allow space passages. Or, he could directly upgrade the seed of Ouroboros to level 5 and unlock new abilities to complete the licker's special ability transformation right here? Fang Heng glanced at the game hints. Alright, no rush. His current genetic modification progress for the rock-armored gunworm was only 12.55%, and upgrading the seed of Ouroboros was still far off. Moreover, it had already taken an hour to clear the D-level nest. It was a bit tedious. Fang Heng stroked his chin. Thinking carefully, his licker modification body was naturally strong against both the rock-armored gunworms and the mother spider's nest. The licker's stealth and burrowing ability could bypass the artillery fire from the rock-armored gunworms, getting close to them and dragging the mutant worms into melee combat. The rock-armored gunworms wouldn't be able to respond effectively. Calculating roughly, once his next batch of zombie clones respawned, he should be able to clear a D-level nest in about 10 minutes. Seeing that the lickers had already finished digging the passage and the first batch of scattered energy ores had been transported back to the ship, Fang Heng began directing his zombie clones into 2 teams. One team would collect the Deep Crimson Crystals on site, while the other would dig a deep pit and quickly connect the underground passage to the energy ore field. No rush, he would collect the Deep Crimson Crystals first. We'll come back for more next time. On the ship, Deputy Commander Gorn had just returned with a batch of Federation elite soldiers. Because of the sudden mutant worm outbreak, the captain's main team had been surrounded by the mutant worm's ambush, so Gorn had started the emergency plan, requesting reinforcements and sending teams to assist, hoping to relieve the pressure on the main team. He had just fought his way back with his subordinates, but they were still short of completely destroying the nest. With energy and ammo exhausted, they had no choice but to return to the ship for supplies. Report the situation of each team. Yes. Soldiers began to report the situation of each team. Gorn listened, his brows furrowing unconsciously. Trouble. None of the teams had been able to make progress. The reinforcements had arrived, but they were still unable to advance effectively due to the mother spider's nest interference. The long-range attack lines of the mutant worms were too troublesome. They could only push forward slowly, wearing down the enemy. Charging recklessly would result in heavy losses. Every soldier was an elite carefully trained by the Federation. One death means one less soldier. But now, what to do? Now, all available forces were delayed, and even the captain was trapped. The entire ship was left poorly defended except for the bare minimum guard. Who's that? Suddenly, Gorn noticed Fang Heng wandering in the main ship area. The kid had a big box on his back. A box? Where did that come from? Fang Heng had just returned to the ship, delivering the batch of energy crystals he had collected to the starship's mainframe network. Ding! The player has submitted some energy ores. The player gains 212 contribution points for the spawn tribe, huh? Only 200 contribution points? Although the energy crystals delivered weren't much, only 200 contribution points? That's a bit low. Wait. Fang Heng frowned. Although his spawn tribe contribution points had increased, his personal honor experience had not increased. I see. Fang Heng checked the mission carefully. To gain personal and team honor experience, one needed to complete the spawn tribe missions. The mining tasks were Federation issued. While they provided spawn tribe contribution points, they didn't contribute to experience points or merit. Alright then. It's better than nothing. At least there was no risk in exchanging for energy crystals. Let's grab a bit of this wool first. Chapter 2874, Logistics. Fang Heng thought for a moment, then opened the exchange column and selected to exchange for a combat shovel. The combat shovel was needed for accelerated ore digging, and the Deep Crimson Crystal, which had just been discovered, also required the use of a zombie clone for mining. The combat shovel would undoubtedly greatly improve efficiency. Wait. Feng Heng suddenly noticed something. A newly spawned special mission? Material transportation? Mission, material transportation. Description: some frontline combat zones are lacking war materials. Players are required to deliver the corresponding materials to the frontline area and hand them over to the designated personnel. Additional description: if the mission fails, the player's personal contribution points and honor points will be deducted. Transporting a batch of materials to the frontline battlefield? Feng Heng took a rough look. It seemed quite simple, and players could gain contribution points based on the amount and frequency of the delivery, earning quite a bit in one go. Unfortunately, this was a mission issued by the Federation, and completing it would not grant personal honor points. Feng Heng was analyzing the mission rewards when he heard footsteps behind him and turned to look. A middle-aged man wearing a Federation military uniform was staring at him. Is something wrong? Gorn, unaware of Feng Heng's situation, found it strange, wondering when such a peculiar person had come aboard the ship. I'm Deputy Captain Gorn. And you? Who are you? Oh, hello Captain. I'm Feng Heng, here to help as ordered. Help? Gorn raised an eyebrow, confused, and asked, who sent you here? Instructor Benny. Upon hearing this, Gorn's expression changed slightly. Instructor Benny had a great reputation in the military department. Was someone personally recommended by him? Was there something special about this person? At that moment, the ship's large iron doors opened. More than 100 elite Federation soldiers, led by Captain Boyd, entered the ship. Captain Boyd quickly counted the number of soldiers, then walked up to Gorn and reported, Captain Gorn. Captain Boyd Hayes of the 2nd Corps reports. Good work. The reinforcement team from the C-29 district has detected anomalous mutation reactions in a mutant worm nest. You must immediately go and provide reinforcement. Get ready to depart urgently after preparations. Understood. Boyd, the situation in this star zone is extremely dangerous. Ensure your safety and hurry up to destroy the worm nest. Yes. Boyd's expression grew serious as he nodded, calling the nearby Federation soldiers, prepare the combat supplies. Get ready to depart in 5 minutes. Gorn, the deputy captain, watched as Boyd's team left and turned to speak to Feng Heng. Huh? Where did that kid go? He looked around, but Feng Heng had vanished. Gorn looked at a soldier by the mainframe and asked, where's the player who was just here? Report, Captain. Feng Heng just left. He seems to have taken the material transportation mission and was asking me where to pick up the materials. Ah. Material transportation? Gorn was momentarily confused. The missions were automatically issued by the Federation through the mainframe, and some urgent missions would automatically sync with the commission platform. However, Gorn had never expected anyone to accept it. After all, those who could board the ship were all Federation personnel, operating under the command of the captain and the Federation. No one had expected the new player, Feng Heng, to accept a mission. So this kid was from the logistics class? Indeed, logistics was a crucial profession on the battlefield. With the frontline battle heating up and many materials unable to be delivered, the consumption of ammunition was enormous. The transition systems at the front line were disrupted by mutant worms and could not be used. Even with the continuous transport of materials by transport aircraft, it was still insufficient. If Feng Heng could indeed help, it would be far more reliable than recruiting a group of soldiers to transport materials. Gorn instinctively thought of Feng Heng as a logistics player and didn't dwell on it. He immediately said, gather the personnel, rest for an hour, and then prepare to head to area for reinforcement. The captain's situation isn't looking good, and we don't have much time. Yes. Meanwhile, Feng Heng followed the soldier to the front section of the ship to the materials distribution warehouse. Inside the warehouse, several Federation soldiers were directing small mechanical transport robots to load materials onto small transport ships. Boxes of packaged energy ammunition, tactical energy supplements, and powerful stimulants were packed into wooden crates and placed into automatic transport machines. Once the loading was complete, the transport machines took off from the deck and flew out to transport the materials. Some stuff. Feng Heng muttered to himself, glancing at the large stack of boxes on his right. Mr. Feng Heng, these materials need to be delivered to Warzone A55 as quickly as possible. It's very urgent, please be ready. You must deliver them within 90 minutes, or you may delay the operation. The soldier said, looking at Feng Heng with a slightly strange expression. Usually, such transport missions were either assigned to transport ships, making multiple trips back and forth, or an entire team would escort the materials. But now, it was just him? How would he carry them? If the supplies were delayed, it could cause problems for the battle. Feng Heng looked around and asked, could I borrow the transport robots and transport ships on the vessel? Sorry, all of our transport ships are currently in urgent use. We don't have any spare ships to lend you. Additionally, all the positions for transport ships on the ship are fully loaded, so even if you exchange for a transport ship through the mainframe, you won't be able to unload or recharge it inside the base. The soldier's expression grew serious. After a pause, he continued, as for the transport robots, although we don't have extra robots available, you can use contribution points to request them from the mainframe. The robots you exchange for will arrive together with the transition assistance every 10 minutes. The ship will provide free charging services for your transport robots, but please be careful. Small transport robots consume a lot of power and have very low defense capabilities. The theoretical operating time after leaving the base's charging area is only 120 minutes. There may also be fluctuations due to environmental impacts and weight bearing. Please be cautious. Small transport robots are not suitable for long-distance transportation. Thank you. Feng Heng nodded in gratitude. With so many large boxes, there was no way he could carry them on his own. He certainly couldn't have the zombie clone carry them either. If the clone were detected with traces of the seed of Ouroboros, he wouldn't even know how to handle it. So would he have to keep investing contribution points to exchange for transport robots? Fortunately, after taking down a mutant worm nest earlier, he had earned nearly 80,000 contribution points, so he was still in a good position. Feng Heng went to the mainframe and checked the exchange column for the available war machines. The prices were shocking. The price for a small transport drone was already considered relatively cheap, costing 200 points. Other combat-related machines were much more expensive, ranging from thousands to tens of thousands of points. Additionally, the mechanical units would require extra transition fees for teleportation. Chapter 2875, Bind. Consider this an investment, and I'll earn back 100-fold later. Feng Heng muttered to himself in a low voice and chose to make the exchange. 5 minutes later, with the arrival of a new batch of mechanical warfare units through a transition, the 40 or so lightweight transport robots recruited by Feng Heng also entered the ship's deck. The soldiers of the Federation Military Department looked at the transport robots Feng Heng had recruited with a somewhat strange expression. The price of these transport robots was extremely high, and he had bought so many at once? Didn't he know these robots couldn't be taken out of the game world? And where did he get so many contribution points? On the other side, Feng Heng walked up to the transport robots and began fiddling with them. According to the manual, there were 2 modes for controlling the robots. Mechanical control required special tactical helmets to link the brain waves to send commands, or chips could be implanted in the brain to control them. On the other hand, mind control was much more convenient. As long as the player had mastered mid-tier psychic abilities, they could bind to the spirit gemstone embedded in the transport robot's core and control the machine using psychic strength. Comparing the 2 methods, psychic control was more precise and convenient, but it required a higher level of psychic abilities, which made it less commonly used. Feng Heng followed the instructions and reached out to touch a large crystal in front of the transport robot. The spirit gemstone inside the crystal was activated. The large crystal flickered slightly. Ding! The player has successfully bound the lower-tier mechanical control with psychic brand. Go. Feng Heng tried giving the transport robot a command to awaken through his mind. The transport robot immediately woke up from its hibernation mode. It felt quite easy. It was similar to commanding a zombie clone, just a thought and the command was given. Feng Heng quickly bound all the remaining transport robots using his psychic abilities. Soon, more than 20 transport robots walked to a pile of boxes in the warehouse and, following Feng Heng's orders, began pushing the material boxes forward, leaving the ship's area via the transition passage. The warehouse guards, curious, looked over at the transport robots leaving the ship. No way? Was he planning to use the transport robots to move the goods? Hello? Huh? What's up? A soldier snapped out of his thoughts and looked at Feng Heng, who had appeared in front of them without them noticing. I'm here for the Sea Region Materials Transport mission. The materials should be those over there, right? Yes, the transport boxes have an automatic mechanical pulley at the bottom for easier movement. Once the front row of materials is teleported out, the mechanical arms will automatically replenish the rear row to facilitate the transport. Thanks. I was wondering, do you have any extra empty boxes? I need about 20. Empty boxes? The soldier was puzzled for a moment, then turned to look at the warehouse, nodding. We have a lot of empty boxes. I'll get them for you. How many do you need? 20 will do, thanks. Okay, just a moment. I'll go get them. The transport robots lined up, pushing their cargo and leaving the starship base. Many soldiers looked on curiously. Lieutenant Colette, the captain in charge of the warehouse, Colette, also noticed Feng Heng's odd behavior and asked, who is that guy? His name is Feng Heng. He accepted the mission to transport the materials to the Sea region. The soldier nodded, adding, Those transport robots are all exchanged with contribution points. Colette watched Fang Heng and the transport robots leave the starship defense area and slowly head toward the sea region, frowning as he muttered, "Didn't you tell him the robots don't have enough energy to complete the transport?" "I've explained that to him," the soldier quickly defended. "Did you verify his identity? Who sent him here?" Ridiculous. How can someone with an unknown identity take on such an important transport mission? What if something goes wrong?" Colette signaled another subordinate to investigate Fang Heng's identity, looking up at Fang Heng's group of transport robots with a deep sense of worry. If these vital materials didn't make it to Area C, the battle there might be in trouble. However, since this guy was able to appear on the ship and accept the mission, he should have some ability, right? Report. A soldier hurried over and nodded. "Lieutenant Colette, the second batch of materials has already been deployed. Should we proceed with preparations for the third batch?" "The second batch is already done?" Colette was surprised and asked, "So soon? Didn't we still have at least an hour?" "The plan changed. Area C's materials transport mission has been cancelled, so we gained extra time." "Cancelled? Why?" "I didn't receive any orders from superiors to cancel Area C's mission." "What went wrong?" "It's what was arranged in the plan." The soldier was also confused and quickly checked the transport plan, then exclaimed in surprise, "Someone else took on Area C materials transport mission. So it automatically disappeared from the to-do list." "Huh? Who?" "The mission taker is Fang Heng." "Fang Heng? That guy?" Colette suddenly turned around and looked toward the transport robots outside the ship. Good heavens, did he just take all of Area C's materials transport missions in one go? Is he crazy? How could he complete the task with just these transport robots? Who brought this guy to the ship? Was he causing trouble? Huh? Colette raised an eyebrow. Fang Heng and his group of transport robots stopped about 500 meters away from the spawn base's defense barrier. They stopped? What did that mean? What were they going to do? "Captain, that is." Several soldiers noticed something strange and looked over at Fang Heng. They saw the ground trembling slightly, and then several small cracks appeared on the ground. The cracked rocks continued to rise from the fissures, and the cracks gradually expanded, gathering together. Moments later, a hole began to appear on the ground. Mutant worms? Enemies? It didn't look like it. It seemed like that player was behind it. Colette immediately took the binoculars from one of his subordinates and carefully observed Fang Heng's position. It was too far, and the hole was too dark to see clearly, but Colette could see a lot of rubble being thrown out of the hole. The small hole in the ground gradually expanded. Soon, it formed a passage opening about 5 meters in diameter. What the hell? Was this a tunnel? The soldiers were stunned. Digging a tunnel? Report. The player who had gone to investigate Fang Heng's background quickly returned and reported, "The identity has been confirmed. This player, Fang Heng, was personally recommended by Senator Benny. It's said that he helped a lot on the Star River ship earlier and has successfully earned 100 million war contribution points from the Federation Military Department." Chapter 2876, Transport Team Teacher Benny? Colette's mind stirred, and his expression grew more serious. It made sense now. If Benny had recommended him, there must be some ability behind it. Soon, everyone saw the war machines break open the tunnel, and the materials were transported into the tunnel entrance. Afterward, they quickly emerged from the tunnel and began transporting the remaining materials back to the ship. The soldiers exchanged glances. Huh? Was that it? Although the materials were transported into the tunnel, what next? How was he planning to get all those boxes from the tunnel to the front lines in Area C? At this moment, Fang Heng stood inside the tunnel, watching the countdown of the game prompt. 3, 2, 1. Whoosh. 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 The resurrection time of the zombie clones had arrived. A dense array of magic circles hovered around Fang Heng, and waves of liquors emerged from the magic array, quickly filling the entire underground cavern. The first batch of 5,000 zombie clones had arrived on the battlefield. One wave after another, no rush. Fang Heng raised his hand and pointed toward the depths of the tunnel. Go. The liquor horde immediately surged forward, rapidly digging and expanding the underground passage toward Area C. Next, it was time for the transport. Fang Heng glanced at the piles of material boxes stacked at the tunnel entrance. The material boxes were large and heavy. Ordinary transport machines couldn't carry too much at once, so the Federation was under significant transportation pressure. But ground transportation had no such issue. The bottom of the material boxes had foldable unlockable pulleys, making dragging and pushing very convenient. Under Fang Heng's control, hundreds of liquors quickly transformed into vine zombies, then proceeded to latch onto the boxes with their vines, binding them tightly. The vine zombies locked the boxes securely before extending new vines that connected to the liquors in front. The lickers, entangled in vines, acted as the driving force, pulling the vine zombies and pulley-bound boxes along the underground passage toward the front. The material boxes were heavy, but the lickers had high strength. 2 lickers could easily pull 1 box. Done. Fang Hang looked at his completed transport system in a good mood and snapped his fingers. It had taken over half an hour. Soon, the last batch of boxes was transported into the underground. Fang Hang began directing the lickers to reseal the tunnel entrance. The transport drones also entered the last 20 empty boxes, entering standby energy-saving mode. Fang Hang personally closed the lids of the boxes. The vine zombies quickly climbed onto the boxes, transforming them into zombie transport vehicles. Fang Hang glanced at the underground passage's excavation, nodding silently. The underground tunnel to Area C was already about 3/4 dug. Good, there was still plenty of time. Let's go. On the surface, far from the ship's deck, the Federation soldiers watched as the light transport machines completed the transportation of all the materials to Area C, then followed into the hole and disappeared, exchanging looks. Was that it? It felt almost unreal. Colette stared at the spot where the tunnel entrance had disappeared, deep in thought. Something about it didn't sit right. It felt like Fang Hang was a bandit, hauling the materials away. But since Benny had recommended him, there shouldn't be a big issue. Looking up, Colette saw the soldiers who had gathered nearby speaking quietly, and he scolded them in a low voice. All right, stop staring. The 3rd batch of transportation plans has been completed. Are you also idle? Get to work. Yes. Area C. Boyd led his team into the designated location in Area C, using remote firepower to suppress the insect swarm along the edge. After some time in battle, the Federation teams had developed detailed combat plans. It was roughly divided into 3 phases. The first phase involved pulling and depleting the insect swarm. The second phase was a sustained push, advancing deeper into the insect nest. The third phase gathered firepower to attack the insect queen, completely eliminating the nest and occupying the area. They were still in the first phase. It was also the most time-consuming and energy-draining phase. After the rock-armored gunworms formation was fully set up, the Federal team rarely chose to risk a direct assault. Instead, they used long-range beam weapons to lock on and carry out precision strikes from beyond the worm's firing range. The high-tier weapons provided by the spawns ensured strong and precise long-range output. Theoretically, they could stay outside the insect swarm's attack range and rely on their range advantage to drag the fight out. But the downside was the need for time to position and the high energy consumption of the weapons. Additionally, the rock-armored gunworms would continuously adjust their formation, either moving forward or backward, requiring the Federation soldiers to keep moving with them, slowly wearing down the swarm. In theory, if the dragging was done well, players could do so without taking damage. But in reality, it wasn't such an easy game. Even if players stayed outside the rock-armored gunworm's range, the swarm would still launch long-range artillery attacks. The hit rate was low, and more than 98% of the attacks missed. But the number of bugs and the number of artillery shots were too much. Under the barrage of concentrated energy fire, some unlucky soldiers would inevitably get hit. The high-tier tactical suits provided by the spawns could absorb the damage of 2 artillery hits, and the potions the players used could make them immune to 1 fatal damage. That meant 3 lives. Unless someone was incredibly unlucky and got hit 4 times in a row, casualties were unlikely during this first phase. As long as the players could keep their tactical suits' energy shields topped up. After over half an hour, the Federation team's energy reserves and ammunition were running low. Captain. Energy is already down to 90%. Boyd glanced at the time and nodded. Switch to backup energy for combat. Our supplies will arrive soon. Understood. The soldiers switched to backup ammunition and continued entangling the insect swarm. Suddenly, someone noticed a disturbance behind them. What was going on? They looked back, and with a slight tremor in the ground, large cracks began appearing. Watch out. Behind. The soldiers quickly retreated a short distance, aiming their guns at the broken rock and soil behind them. What the hell? Was it a new mutant worm creature? The soldiers nervously tightened their grips on their weapons, sweat forming on their foreheads. What was that? They saw the ground cracking wider, and soon, a wooden crate appeared from the ground, rising from the hole. What? A transport robot? The Federation soldiers recognized the transport machines. The logistics had arrived? Phew. It was just a false alarm. The soldiers looked at each other, then sighed in relief and lowered their guns. The transport robots continued to bring materials to the back of the team, then returned to the tunnel to carry more. One by one, the transport machines began delivering materials through the underground passage, reaching the back of the team. Chapter 2877, Commission goodness, when did the command post develop such special transportation capabilities? They didn't even give a heads up, suddenly bringing out such scary things on the battlefield. It almost scared me to death. The Federation soldiers were murmuring when they saw a player emerge from the ground passageway and walk towards them. Sorry to bother you, may I ask who is Lieutenant Boyd? Boyd walked forward and replied, I am. Hello, I am Fang Heng. I accepted the Federation's commission to transport materials. The materials have been safely delivered, and here is the commission agreement. Please confirm and sign. Alright, I need to check them first. Boyd looked at Fang Heng, then at the boxes of energy supplies, signaling his trusted subordinate to check the materials. He furrowed his brows and asked, Are you from the logistics team? Did you come alone? Yes. After the soldier checked the materials, he hurriedly returned to report. Lieutenant Boyd, the materials have been counted and are confirmed to be correct. Boyd quickly signed the commission form and said, The items have been successfully received, thank you for your help. You're welcome. Fang Heng confirmed the commission form and glanced at the battle area in the distance, thinking to himself that the Federation's combat strength seemed pretty average. This was just a D-level mutant worm nest, it shouldn't be this troublesome. Originally, Fang Heng had planned to continue delivering materials, as there were still several points in Area C that needed resupply. However, the liquor swarm was still digging the passage. There was still some time. Since he had nothing else to do, why not earn some extra contribution points by completing a mission to eliminate the nest? Boyd saw Fang Heng standing there, looking thoughtful, and quietly reminded him, Fang Heng, thanks for your assistance. The materials have been received. This is the front line area, very dangerous, so please be careful. Do you need help? Huh? Do you need help? Fang Heng pointed to the nearby nest area. I can help. Huh? Boyd looked at Fang Heng, still somewhat confused and repeated, Help? You mean assist us in breaking the nest? Exactly. I didn't see any related missions issued by the Federation for the ship's mainframe area, but if you're willing to give me the corresponding contribution points from the spawns, I can help you deal with the nest. Boyd was completely confused by Fang Heng, staring at him blankly. Fang Heng also thought the officer was a bit slow, as if he couldn't understand what he was saying. It was too tedious. He still had other transport tasks. Ahem, let me put it more simply, Fang Heng said, raising his hand to point at a nearby area of the worm swarm. I will solve this nest for you, but you need to pay me 10,000 contribution points. Each transport of materials costs 500 points. If I take care of the source, you can save a lot on multiple transport fees. Doesn't that sound reasonable? Fang Heng saw that Boyd wasn't speaking and looked embarrassed, so he decided to lower his price. Alright, how about 5,000 points? That should be fair, since after I take care of the nest mother and clean up the area, you'll benefit as well. Boyd, hearing Fang Heng's negotiation, finally snapped out of his daze and realized Fang Heng wasn't joking. He furrowed his brows and said, Are you sure you can do it? After all, he was recommended by Benny. Maybe this guy had found a way to deal with the mutant worm nest? As long as he could do it, even if it was 20,000, it'd be worth it. I'm not joking. Just consider it agreed. We'll settle up after I complete the mission. Boyd looked at Fang Heng's confidence and, still uncertain, nodded reluctantly. Fine, try it then. If it fails, it won't hurt. Good. Fang Heng replied, then turned around and slowly raised his hand, facing the direction of the worm nest creep. The soldiers nearby, adjusting their tactical equipment, all cast curious looks at Fang Heng. Was this guy really capable, or was he just bluffing? You guys see that? The others quickly looked toward the direction of the mutant worm swarm. They saw that the area Fang Heng had pointed to was suddenly in turmoil for some unknown reason. What was going on? Boyd immediately grabbed the tactical binoculars handed to him by his subordinate. What? He saw that the cracks suddenly appeared under the legs of the armored cannon worms, and strange, never-before-seen mutant worm creatures crawled out of the fissures, attacking the nearby cannon worms. The mutant worms emerging from the ground were extremely violent and savage, and their close combat abilities were terrifying. They began massacring the armored cannon worms. This. Boyd opened his mouth in shock, eyes filled with astonishment, then looked back at Fang Heng, his eyes filled with horror. They are your summoned creatures. Exactly. Fang Heng nodded and said, Tell your people to get ready. As he spoke, cracks began to appear one by one across the worm nest creep. Soon, the armored cannon worm's defensive line was disrupted, and lickers began emerging everywhere. With the armored cannon worm's formation in disarray, they lost their ability to launch long-range attacks. Boyd, having fought the worm swarm for days, immediately recognized that this was their chance. He looked excited and waved his hand. Prepare the weapons, let's go. Annihilate the worms. Wear them down. The Federation soldiers, seeing that Fang Heng wasn't joking, immediately became serious. After resupplying, they switched to energy weapons and aimed at the target in the middle, firing beam weapons at the Plague Mother. Huh? Fang Heng also noticed something at this moment. The Federation's energy beam weapons seemed to be specially designed, extremely powerful, and capable of dealing several times the damage to the armored cannon worms and Plague Mother. At the regular range, a single hit could almost kill. Under the Federation's overwhelming firepower, the liquor swarm was rapidly worn down. The entire team advanced quickly. A Federation soldier, after injecting a powerful potion, immediately felt their blood boil, maintaining their composure while firing their guns to kill the worms. The liquors, positioned at the forefront, caused chaos in the swarm, allowing the player team to safely output damage from behind. Once the distance was closed, the beam weapons' accuracy and attack strength greatly improved. Energy weapons played a massive role on the battlefield, significantly increasing the damage dealt. The entire Federation team advanced at a rapid pace, destroying all the Plague Mothers and armored cannon worms with beam weapons. Fang Heng, seeing this, immediately followed. Soon, the first wave of armored cannon worms was cleared, and the number of incoming worms decreased sharply. Now, the liquor swarm could easily finish them off. Chapter 2878, Cleaning up the Federation soldier squad. Players had to speed up to keep up and chase after the liquors. Void, considering safety, calmed down and signaled for the player team to slow down slightly and maintain formation. Fortunately, the low-tier D-level bug nest area wasn't large, so the teams didn't get too far apart. They quickly arrived at the perimeter of the central mother spider nest. From a distance, the perimeter of the mother spider nest was already surrounded by clusters of rock-armored gun worms. Huh? Where were Fang Heng summoned creatures? The soldiers were puzzled. Boyd frowned as well. Here they came. Bang. 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 In the next moment, the ground beneath the gathered rock-armored gun worms began to violently churn. The liquor swarm had already used their stealth skill to burrow underground. As soon as the Federation players arrived, they suddenly erupted from the exploded soil around the mother spider nest. The rock-armored artillery bug defense around the mother spider nest was once again harassed and killed by the liquor swarm, and had no time to care about the soldiers of Boyd's team approaching from a distance. The opportunity had arrived. Boyd had never fought such a smooth battle and his spirits were lifted to the extreme. He had originally thought there would be some difficulty dealing with the mother spider nest, but Fang Heng summoned creatures had once again controlled the situation. What were they waiting for now? If they lost this battle, it would be better to just commit suicide. Advance. Aim and fire, concentrate firepower to take down the mother spider creature. Understood. The Federation elite soldiers knew this was a perfect opportunity. They immediately switched their weapons and began firing a concentrated attack on the mother spider nest. The mother spider nest was large in size, making it easy to aim at. There was no need to get too close. In an instant, dense beams of light fired at the mother spider nest in a covering barrage. Fang Heng, standing aside, had a look of surprise in his eyes. Unlike the blue light beams used against ordinary insect swarms, the energy beam weapons used by the Federation team this time released a faint purple light. The faint purple beams dealt terrifying damage to the mother spider nest. Fang Heng saw the overall health of the mother spider nest drop drastically. The beam weapons even managed to affect the mother spider nest's self-healing abilities. Were these special weapons for the seed of Ouroboros? His liquor swarm had not fully dealt with the rock-armored gunworms gathered around the mother spider nest, and yet the mother spider nest had already exploded under the concentrated fire of hundreds of Federation elites. Boom. With the mother spider nest's health emptied and it died, the flesh and blood attached to the red crystal exploded, revealing a deep red crystal underneath. Fang Heng's retina displayed the kill notification. Ding. The player killed the mother spider nest. D-level, mutated leader. The player gained 350 spawn contribution points and 350 spawn honor points. Ding. The player successfully cleared the D-level bug nest. Player gained 1,929 spawn contribution points and 1,929 spawn honor points. Well, since the Federation was involved in the mission, part of the contribution points had been divided. That was acceptable. After all, without the Federation's help, he wouldn't have been able to clear the nest so quickly. After the mother spider nest was destroyed, the Federation soldiers' morale surged. Under Boyd's command, they worked with the liquor swarm to clear the nearby Holy Realms insect swarms. Once all the bugs were cleared, the creep on the ground slowly receded. Boyd nodded at his soldiers. The players switched their energy beam weapons again and aimed at the crystal. Seeing this, Fang Heng quickly stopped them. Wait, what are you planning to do? Boyd signaled his subordinates to pause their shooting and looked at Fang Heng, explaining, Fang Heng, you may not know, but these crystals are known as crimson gemstones. Research has found that mutant worm creatures depend on these crystals to absorb energy and breed more insects. All known bug nests are attached to these crimson gemstones. If we don't destroy them completely, the mutant worms might recolonize the crimson crystals and set up another bug nest here. We would have to come back and clear it again. Boyd raised a gun in his hand, so, smashing them is the simplest way to handle it. No. Fang Heng blocked Boyd's way. The crimson crystals are useful to me. I'll handle them. You? Boyd frowned and said, this doesn't follow the prescribed clearing procedure. I need to consult with my superiors. Of course, you can contact your superiors, but until you get their response, please don't destroy the crystals. Alright. Boyd hesitated for a moment, then lowered his gun. But if I notice any signs that the mutant worms are recolonizing the crimson gemstones, I'll destroy them immediately. It would take time for the worms to recolonize the crimson crystals and transform them into another nest, at least 3 days. There was no immediate concern. Boyd nodded, then contacted the headquarters through his communicator and said, Fang Heng, I've reported the situation about retaining the crimson crystals and your contribution points to the ship. We're waiting for approval from any of the captains. Unfortunately, all the captains are out on missions, so it might take a little time. Don't worry, once we get the approval, the contribution points will be immediately credited to your account. Also, we'll be heading to the next location to assist the team in clearing the nest. The transport ship will be here in 10 minutes. Will you be joining us to support the team? Fang Heng shook his head and replied, no, I have some materials to deliver. Alright, thanks again for your help. Boyd didn't think too much, and with his team, they waited for the transport ship. He watched as Fang Heng and his group of transport robots disappeared into the passage and out of sight. Moments later, the transport ship arrived, and they boarded it to head to the next operation site. Fang Heng climbed out of the passage again. Half a minute later, dense magic arrays appeared around Fang Heng's body. The second wave of 5,000 lickers jumped out of the magic array. The licker swarm immediately condensed into cocoons and returned to their normal zombie forms, rushing toward the crimson crystal to begin manually digging it out. The crimson crystals were important materials for modifying the licker's ranged attack abilities. They couldn't let them go to waste. He would dig them out first and see if he could rent a warehouse on the Federation ship to store them. The transport ship was expected in half an hour. He had to hurry. Fang Heng thought for a moment and returned to the underground passage, controlling the licker swarm to gather the materials and head toward the next sea-level squad's domain. Chapter 2879, Disaster Area. The Federation had designated Area C as a heavy mutant worm nest disaster zone. Boyd's team arrived at the periphery of the C-29 mutant worm nest area for reinforcement by transport aircraft. The Federation had dispatched dozens of small teams similar to Boyd's, breaking up into teams of 3,120 people to assault various flanks of the external worm nests. Their overall goal was to provide cover for the main team led by the captain. If any small team completed their mission objectives early, they could choose to assist other teams or return to the ship for rest and receive a new mission. Igor's team was engaged in a tug-of-war battle with the worm swarm in the C-29 area. Upon seeing Boyd's team arrive with reinforcements, their pressure was greatly relieved. The two captains knew each other and had collaborated before, so they exchanged signals from a distance, tacitly attacking the nest from 2 directions simultaneously. The tug-of-war with the mutant worm swarm continued. After more than 10 minutes of battle, Boyd could not help but sigh as he saw that the number of the enemy's armored cannon worms had not visibly decreased. It would have been nice if Fang Heng were here. With his summoned creature's help, they could probably clear the D-level worm nest in just over 10 minutes. Though the Federation soldiers still maintained their combat strength, their morale subtly began to shift. It felt like playing a game. Once you've used hacks, returning to the standard play felt boring. Boyd, intending to say something to lift their spirits, suddenly noticed something and turned sharply toward the rear. On the battlefield, fine cracks suddenly appeared in the rocky ground. Boyd's eyebrows twitched involuntarily. That familiar feeling was back. Could it be? Was it Fang Heng? Had he come again? The Federation soldiers in Boyd's team, also feeling distracted, looked toward the rear. Upon seeing the cracks in the ground, they began to murmur. Had Fang Heng come again? Would they be able to hack again? But they had just arrived via transport aircraft, and considering the time spent fighting, it had been less than 15 minutes. Could Fang Heng have gotten here so quickly through the underground passages? Be careful. Prepare for battle. On the other side, Igor's team, having never encountered such a strange situation, immediately retreated to the outskirts of the nest area and aimed their guns at the crack in the ground, adopting a battle-ready stance. The cracks in the ground rapidly expanded, quickly merging into a vast opening, until a large black cavern appeared. What was that? A cave? Igor swallowed nervously, watching the ever-expanding cavern entrance. A large supply crate was pushed out of the cavern, gradually appearing in the soldiers' line of sight. What? Upon closer inspection, a transport robot was pushing a supply crate out from the bottom of the cavern. And it wasn't just one. One after another, crates were being pushed by the mechanical robots out of the cavern, forming a line. Igor's team of soldiers were stunned, watching in awe as the transport drones delivered crates of materials one after another. Boyd's soldiers were equally surprised. Good grief. It really was Feng Heng? These mechanical creatures were so familiar. Were they here to deliver materials again? Could the underground passage really be that fast? Soon, they saw Feng Heng walking out from below the ground. Feng Heng looked at the soldiers outside, confirmed the target, and then walked toward Igor. Lieutenant Igor, I didn't expect to meet you so soon. The materials have been delivered. Could you please sign for them? How? Alright. Igor was momentarily at a loss. He naturally recognized Feng Heng. He was the player personally recommended by Instructor Benny to join the game. It was said that he was extremely strong. Moreover, it was Igor who had accepted the mission and brought Feng Heng into this game world. But he never expected to meet him in this manner on the battlefield. After the soldiers finished confirming the supplies, Igor quickly signed for them. Thanks. I still have a mission to attend to. Goodbye. Feng Heng turned to leave, but Boyd hurriedly approached with two soldiers. Mr. Feng Heng. Lieutenant Boyd, what a coincidence. What brings you here? Haha. Boyd laughed heartily and said, Mr. Feng Heng, this is fate. Since you're already here, could you give us a hand again, just like last time? We'd be willing to offer you additional contribution points. Feng Heng raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. It was tempting. Seeing Feng Heng hesitate, Boyd thought he was dissatisfied with the price and immediately raised the offer. Let me give you a heads up, my authority allows me to offer a maximum of 10,000 contribution points. What do you think? If you help us deal with the worm nest like last time, those 10,000 contribution points will be yours. We could also have further cooperation. Igor, watching from the side, was stunned. When did Feng Heng and Boyd become so familiar? And 10,000 contribution points? Had Boyd gone crazy? Spawn contribution points were very difficult to earn, unlike battlefield contribution points from other worlds. Feng Heng could feel Boyd's enthusiasm. He was indeed tempted by the 10,000 contribution points. However, his transport mission had a time limit. If he failed to complete it, he would lose a significant amount of contribution points and honor points. I'm afraid it won't work. I still have 3 more shipments to deliver, and if I don't finish them within 20 minutes, it might affect the overall battle. 20 minutes? Boyd heard this and immediately made a decision. No problem, we can wait for you. The mission will still be valid after 20 minutes. Feng Heng's eyelids twitched, and he confirmed, 10,000 contribution points? Yes. Alright then. Feng Heng smiled and immediately extended his hand to shake Boyd's. Pleasure working with you. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Soon, Igor and Boyd watched as Feng Heng, accompanied by a group of transport robots, left. Igor looked at Boyd and asked, are you very familiar with him? Not exactly. 10,000 contribution points? Are you sure your superiors won't have an issue with this? Boyd patted Igor on the shoulder confidently and said, trust me, just wait for the commendation from the higher-ups. Half an hour later, Igor and his team were stunned. After witnessing Feng Heng's terrifying combat strength as he controlled the mutant worms, their feelings were the same as Boyd's soldiers had been over an hour ago. Feng Heng. That guy was a monster. No wonder Feng Heng was so highly valued by Instructor Benny, even being personally recommended to join the game. Chapter 2880, Summoned Creature. The young man had used his summoned creatures to forcefully break through the entire defense line set up by the mutant worm swarm. They only needed to follow the summoned creatures and shoot to clear out the worms. Unlike the back-and-forth struggles they had before, it felt like playing a game with an invincibility cheat, releasing all the frustrations they had previously suffered from the worm swarm. It was an incredibly refreshing feeling. Once the worm nest's mother spider, which occupied the crimson crystal, was completely shattered, the creep on the ground quickly dissipated, and the Federation team successfully completed their mission. The liquor group quickly crawled through the rifts in the ground and disappeared from sight. Thank you again for your help. We will quickly add the contribution points to your identity card. No need to thank me. Feng Heng said as he glanced at his game log. With the help of the Federation, the mission provided by the spawns earned him about 3/4 of the contribution points, nearly 3,000 points. Adding the additional 10,000 contribution points provided by the Federation, he considered it a big win. Our soldiers need to rest. We will return to the ship's headquarters to rest for a while and remove the accumulated toxins in the cultivation pod. Will you return with us? No. Feng Heng gestured toward the cave entrance in the distance. I have other ways to get back. Igor and Boyd exchanged puzzled glances. They both found it strange. Since Fang Heng summoned creatures were so strong, why not directly assist the teams in eliminating the worm nests? Instead, he was eager to stay in logistics, focusing on material transportation missions. They couldn't understand. They both thought that this might be a special mission arranged by Instructor Benny, and since the military rules kept them from asking too many questions, they nodded and said, "All right, take care, we look forward to seeing you again." Boyd and Igor cupped their fists at Fang Heng and took their soldier squad to board the transport ship back to the Federation ship. After they left, Fang Heng summoned the liquor group again from the rifts in the ground. The group gathered on the surface and formed flesh cocoons. Soon, vine zombie clones crawled out of the flesh cocoons, walked over to the crimson crystals on the ground, and began to mine the ores. Fang Heng silently calculated in his mind. This wave of material delivery, plus the contribution points he earned from Boyd, totaled nearly 40,000 points. Once he returned, he could exchange for more transport machines and multifunctional combat shovels to expand his ore mining operations. Next, there would be no need to hassle with directly eliminating worm nests. He could just use his zombie team to mine. At least for now, no mining areas had been threatened by worm swarms. Dig. The snowball effect would only get bigger and bigger, and the efficiency of earning contribution points would only increase. In the main ship's rest area, the Federation soldiers returned. After a brief rest, they entered the cultivation pod to repair their damaged bodies. During battles, soldiers used various special potions to maintain peak combat strength and focus. The potions could temporarily boost attributes but would leave toxins in the body. These toxins needed to be removed through the cultivation pod. Moreover, the red fog spores that spread in this world also contained minor toxins. If absorbed too much, they could have negative effects and also needed to be removed in the cultivation pod. So, generally, soldiers wouldn't continue fighting for long periods. As for Fang Heng, since his main body was the seed of Ouroboros, he was completely immune to the effects of the red fog spores and directly returned to the warehouse. Soon, the soldiers in the warehouse area saw Fang Heng again. The lieutenant in charge of the warehouse, Colette, also noticed Fang Heng and looked at him more than once. This kid was something. He had already checked. Fang Heng's transport commission tasks showed that they had been completed. It was unbelievable. Even now, Colette couldn't figure out how Fang Heng completed the task. Colette watched Fang Heng linger in the warehouse and didn't leave, so he called a soldier over to ask in a low voice, "What did Fang Heng say to you earlier?" "Nothing special. He just asked if we could provide some empty boxes, saying that his recent demand was high, and he would be willing to exchange contribution points for them." Colette frowned deeply at hearing this, his suspicion growing. "Boxes? Did he say what he needed them for?" The soldier shook his head in confusion and said, "He didn't say. There are still plenty of boxes left in the warehouse. Since you previously mentioned emergency wartime status and that we should try to meet the demands of other teams, we just gave them to him for free." "Alright, never mind. You did well. Go back to work." Soon, with the arrival of the spawn's reinforcements, another 100 transport machines appeared. In addition, there were crates of materials that had been transferred through spatial transmission. The Federation soldiers who were responsible for sorting the materials checked them and were curious. "Huh?" A large portion of the materials were personal items, and the signatory was Fang Heng. "Fang Heng? You have personal items here. Please come and sign for them." The soldiers all turned their eyes toward Fang Heng. Since it was personal property, the certification belonged to an individual, so the soldiers didn't have the authority to open the crates and didn't know what was inside. The more they didn't know, the more curious they became. "Thanks, just leave them for now. I'll handle them soon and won't take up the passage for long." Fang Heng walked up and, under the gaze of the soldiers, opened the crates. The soldiers peeked inside. "Huh? Shovels?" The crates were packed full of multifunctional combat shovels. "What the hell?" Everyone was stunned. What did he need so many combat shovels for? Fang Heng roughly counted the number and then took one combat shovel out of the box, weighing it in his hand before tossing it back in. Nice. The combat shovels provided by the spawns were top quality. They had high durability, were resistant to wear, and also improved digging efficiency and success rates. Fang Heng closed the crate, then used his psychic powers to bind the newly delivered transport machines one by one. The transport robots were soon activated and began pushing boxes filled with shovels and empty boxes out of the ship, entering the underground passage outside the ship, and disappearing from view. The soldiers looked at each other in bewilderment. They didn't know that deep underground, not far from the Federation ship, a massive underground space had already been dug out by the zombie team. With the empty boxes, batches of crimson crystal ores began to be transported and stored in the underground space. Additionally, there were boxes of energy ores. The crimson crystals would be used to upgrade the liquors, though they weren't needed yet, so they would be temporarily stored. But the energy ores didn't need storage. After being mined, they would be directly delivered back to the Federation ship. Feng Heng appeared to be standing there, zoning out, but in fact, he was multitasking, coordinating the mining and boxing work of the zombie teams in various mining areas. With the newly supplied multifunctional combat shovels, the digging speed would see a significant improvement. Move. Empty the entire mining area. Chapter 2881, working half an hour later, the soldiers in the warehouse suddenly noticed transport robots pushing boxes out of the underground passage outside the ship's base. Boxes? They're pushing them out again? Usually, the transport robots were seen delivering boxes into the hole, but this was the first time seeing them bringing boxes out. What could it be? Hey, what are you looking at? Nothing, nothing. The soldiers shrank their necks and continued with their work. Inside the warehouse, more and more soldiers noticed the situation outside on the deck, all of them trying to peek and figure out what was going on. But fearing being scolded by Colette, they could only steal a few glances. Soon, the transport robots pushed the boxes into the ship's hull, leaving them in the temporary storage area, before immediately returning. Feng Heng, standing aside, checked the mission commission information from the spawn's mainframe, frowned, and then looked around the ship's interior, asking, "Excuse me, who is Colonel Colette?" A small amount of ore could be submitted directly to the mainframe, but when Feng Heng tried submitting box after box of ore, the mainframe immediately sent a hint saying it couldn't accept it. He needed to find a Federation officer to handle the material receipt. "I'm the one." Colette, who had already noticed Feng Heng's strange actions, stepped out from the crowd and asked, "You must be Feng Heng. I've heard of you. Instructor Benny personally recommended you. Is there something I can help you with?" "Colonel Colette, it's like this. I've accepted a commission from the mainframe and brought a batch of energy ore. The mainframe shows that you're the one to accept it." Feng Heng pointed to the transport robots, who were steadily bringing the energy ore boxes over. "Can I temporarily store them here? When can we proceed with the sign-off and certification?" "Huh?" Colette was stunned, then glanced at the boxes piled up in the temporary storage area. "You mean all these are energy ore?" "Yes, that's right." Feng Heng nodded and gestured. Beside the boxes, a transport robot opened one of them, revealing it was filled with ore. The soldiers around them had already turned their attention to the scene. Now, they all gathered to look at the open boxes, their eyes showing astonishment. Wow! They really were energy ores. Although the ores came in varying quality, with some being inferior and others superior, it was clear they were indeed ores. No way? Just 20 minutes ago, the boxes were empty when they went out. Now they're full of energy ore? How did that happen? Was that underground cavern connected to a mining area? Colette nodded at a nearby soldier, signaling them to count the energy crystals. "Thank you for the help you've provided to the Federation. The energy crystals can be stored here for now. I will handle them properly. As for the classification of the energy ores, it's still pending. We'll sort and settle them. It may take some time, but once it's done, your contribution points will be directly credited to your account." In fact, the ship wasn't in immediate need of energy crystals, but it was always good to have more stored just in case. Moreover, according to the Federation's plan, they indeed needed to store some extra energy crystals to deal with potential future troubles. But the Federation hadn't anticipated Feng Heng's arrival. Feng Heng, with the idea of making the most of the situation, controlled his zombie team to relentlessly mine the ore. Soon, the transport robots formed a line, continuously bringing boxes of ore from the catacombs beneath the ship and unloading them into the ship without stopping. The Federation soldiers were stunned. They had seen ore being gathered before, but never had they seen someone work this hard to collect ores like Feng Heng. Feng Heng was quite satisfied with his zombies' mining efficiency. Although the exchange rate for energy ore to contribution points wasn't high, the sheer volume of ore being mined made up for it. With this efficiency, he could easily get the Grandmaster level psychic ability after just 2 days of grinding. The key was safety, plus he could fully manage everything. It was all about ease of mind. Meanwhile, Colette noticed that the ores were more than expected, so he assigned a few soldiers to sort them. In Colette's mind, Feng Heng probably just happened to find an underground mining area and dug up some ores that were already mined. It was perfect, as the ore reserves were now sorted. He hoped that it would fill up the backup warehouse number 1. Colette never imagined that these ores were mined by Feng Heng himself, and he had plenty more to deliver. Not just the backup warehouse, but all the warehouses on the ship could be filled. While Colette was busy directing soldiers to transport the ores to the backup warehouse, not far away, a lieutenant from the Empire walked into the armory. "Lieutenant Jane." 2 soldiers at the entrance immediately saluted. Seeing Jane, Colette walked up to greet him. Jane, what brings you here today? Weren't you satisfied with the last batch of materials? Of course not, I know that the goods you gave me are top-notch, Jane said, giving Colette a thumbs up. The two had been soldiers together and had trained in the same class, so they shared a close bond. On to business, I am here to find Feng Heng, Jane said, looking around the warehouse. I heard he's here. Have you seen him? Huh? Feng Heng again? Colette's heart skipped a beat, and he whispered, what do you need him for? Ah, don't even mention it. Jane waved his hand, looking helpless. I ran into a sea-level bug nest mission. I spent 2 days trying to handle it but couldn't. When I was in the cultivation pod earlier, I bumped into Boyd, and we chatted a bit. He recommended Feng Heng to me. Colette was even more confused. Huh? Boyd recommended Feng Heng? Recommended him to help you transport materials? Transport materials? Jane didn't understand, correcting, no, he recommended him to help. I heard this guy's amazing. As long as you can provide contribution points, he can deal with a B-level nest all by himself. Is that true? Colette was initially surprised, then thought of Boyd and couldn't help but laugh. That's a bit too much, don't you think? Boyd's always talking big. The captain has spent days trying to deal with a B-level nest, and it still hasn't been cleared. You expect Feng Heng to do it alone? Boyd was known for his big mouth, and most of the things he said were exaggerated. If Boyd were the only one saying it, I'd believe only about 3 points of what he says, but Igor was there too, and he personally confirmed that Feng Heng is quite skilled. Jane became serious. You know Igor, right? He's very honest. He only says what he's completely sure of. Colette became more serious. What did Igor say? Chapter 2882, Settling It Well. According to what he said, he is not sure whether Feng Heng can handle the B-level insect nest, but he is certain that handling a D-level insect nest alone is definitely not a problem. He believes Feng Heng will be able to help me. Such a high evaluation? Colette glanced at Feng Heng, who was standing next to boxes of sorted door soldiers not far away, a bit surprised. What? He was able to handle a D-level insect nest alone? If that's the case, why was he even working in their logistics department? Hey, brother, is that guy still around? Yeah, he's over there. He just brought in a batch of ore to complete a mission and exchange it for contribution points. I was wondering about that myself. Alright, I'll go have a chat with him. If he can help, I'll pay part of the commission contribution points myself, Jane said, and then went off to talk to Feng Heng. Colette stood a bit further away, watching as Jane handed Feng Heng a pack of rare Ma-O-Tai chocolate and casually threw his arm over his shoulder to chat with him. Not long after, Feng Heng said something to the nearby soldier, then left the warehouse with Jane, chatting and laughing together. Looks like they reached some kind of cooperation agreement? Colette smiled bitterly and scratched his head. Jane knew how to communicate efficiently. But Colette looked at the transport robots still continuously coming out of the catacombs. Wait, it seemed Feng Heng had not stopped his ore deliveries? The transport robots were still making constant trips between the ship and the passage below, transporting energy crystals back to the ship. It seemed like it wasn't over yet. Colette waved over the soldier who had just spoken to Feng Heng. Captain Colette. What did Feng Heng say to you before he left? He said he'd be gone for a while to complete a mission but would be back soon. During this time, his machines will continue to transport materials, and he hoped we'd look after them. He offered us some contribution points, but we didn't accept. Colette fell silent. So, there were still a lot of energy ores that had not been delivered yet? Just as he was thinking, a cheerful voice sounded behind him. Colette, how's it going? Haven't seen you in a while. Everything good here? Colette turned around and looked at the big guy, Mir, who had appeared behind him. He raised an eyebrow and asked, You're not here to find Feng Heng, are you? Mir was taken aback for a moment, then scratched his head and laughed loudly. Haha, amazing, you figured it out. Colette thought, as expected, and shook his head, You're too late. He just left with Jane. Damn. That kid. Always stealing my people. Mir grumbled, waving his hand. Alright, I'm off to complete my mission. Let's chat next time. Compared to Jane, Mir clearly had a lower emotional intelligence. Colette smiled bitterly inside. Damn, with Boyd's big mouth, in half an hour, everyone on the ship will know about this Feng Heng guy. Area C. The transport ship slowly descended from the sky. Jane led the Federation elite team to the periphery of the battlefield for reinforcement. Feng Heng was also among them. Upon seeing the situation ahead, Feng Heng was somewhat surprised. Wow, so many war machines? The Federation army had already begun fighting against the insect nest and the mutant worm creatures, and the battle was still ongoing. Unlike the previous D-level insect nest, The Federation team had deployed high-tier mechanical combat units in this area. Feng Heng observed briefly, and the mechanical creatures could be categorized into 3 types. One type was large creatures, over 2 meters tall, capable of releasing barriers to block the rock-armored gunworm's long-range artillery. These large machines moved across the ground with mechanical spider-like legs, creating a transparent crystal barrier with their front claws to intercept and absorb the enemy's attacks. Another type was smaller and hovered in the air, continuously firing light cannon beams from their guns. Although the fire rate was low, the area of effect was wide, and it could cause significant damage to the mutant worm hordes. Lastly, there were many combat units gathering behind the soldiers, yet to engage in battle. They seemed to be melee units. Feng Heng. Jane's gaze gradually shifted toward the war zone covered by the fungal blanket not far away. This insect nest is level C compared to the D-level insect nest. The number and density of rock-armored gunworms have greatly increased. Some mutant worms can crawl quickly on the ground, which are the fungal blanket creatures. Mutant worms? Fungal blanket creatures? Feng Heng asked, puzzled, looking toward the battlefield. Where were they? He did not see them. You can't see them now because they're hiding within the fungal blanket. This helps them avoid being targeted by our energy beams. The blanket also absorbs a lot of the remote attacks, providing them protection. Once our team tries to get close to the defensive line of the mutant worm's long-range artillery, the melee fungal blanket creatures will pop out to intercept us. Jane clearly had a hard time dealing with these mutant worm creatures. As he spoke, his expression grew more serious, and he continued, "We've already been fighting the mutant worm horde for hundreds of times, clearing out wave after wave, but unfortunately, their numbers haven't been significantly reduced. The Federation had invested a lot of time fighting the insect nest. The results, however, were very limited." Jane had once boasted that he would handle it in 3 days and had asked for a huge subsidy from his superiors, exchanging it for Federation war machines, but when he actually engaged in battle, he was stunned. The mutant worm hordes formed a defensive line, and the combat strength of the war machines he'd bought couldn't even be put to use. As the deadline approached, Jane became anxious. But he knew that being anxious wouldn't solve the problem. If he lost his judgment in haste, it would only lead to more unnecessary casualties. "Feng Heng, if there's anything you need, just let us know. We'll try our best to accommodate you." Jane had placed all his bets on Feng Heng, spending 50,000 contribution points to hire him. He didn't expect Feng Heng to completely solve the insect nest, but just hoped he could help weaken the rock-armored gunworm's attacks a little. That way, the war machines of the spawns could be put to good use. Feng Heng thought for a moment. Dealing with the rock-armored gunworms would indeed be simple, but now that the mutant worms had joined in, the combination of melee and long-range units forming a defensive line could pose some difficulty. Anyway, let's give it a try. Feng Heng assessed the progress of the lickers digging tunnels and said, "I'll try to disrupt the long-range defensive line formed by the rock-armored gunworms, but I can't guarantee how much I'll be able to do. Also, I'll need some time to prepare my summoned creatures." Chapter 2883, Reinforcement. Jane's eyes immediately lit up. He had heard Lieutenant Boyd brag about it before. In Boyd's words, Feng Heng summoned creatures were terrifyingly strong. They could almost crush the rock-armored gunworms effortlessly. Jane had thought Boyd was just boasting and didn't expect anything so extreme. He just hoped the summoned creatures could hold off the insect swarm for a while. Now, the firepower of the rock-armored gunworms was too strong. The war machines they had hired at a great cost from the spawns couldn't break through the lines. Even if they did, they were badly damaged and couldn't perform to their full potential. Only by working with Feng Heng summoned creatures could they achieve the best combat effectiveness. Meanwhile, another Federation military lieutenant saw Jane's team arrive but didn't take action right away. He thought something was wrong and went to check on the situation. The soldier ran to communicate and quickly returned. "What happened?" "Lieutenant Jane hasn't encountered any problems. He said we should wait a bit longer," the soldier replied. "Huh? Wait? What exactly is he doing?" The soldier hesitated for a moment and quietly said, "Lieutenant Jane said he managed to call in reinforcements, so we should wait and see how they perform. Once they act, we can follow up and support them." Charles was a bit confused. "Reinforcements? From where?" The cheap junkie had exchanged from the spawns? Charles knew that while Jane often seemed unfocused, he never joked around with the lives of his soldiers on the battlefield. He immediately ordered his troops to stay alert, switch to backup ammunition, and be ready to charge with Jane's team. A moment later, something unusual appeared in the insect swarm ahead. What was that? He saw the ground beneath the rock-armored gunworm's feet suddenly crack open in an unusual way. Black cracks spread across the ground. Then, a brown, spiny mutant worm creature burst out from beneath the cracked surface of the creep. The mutant worm immediately rushed to bite and attack the nearby rock-armored gun worms. In an instant, the line of rock-armored gun worms was thrown into chaos. What the hell was that? The reinforcements Jane called for? They really arrived? Charles' mind raced as he looked to the right, where Jane's team had already sent a melee combat war machine from the spawns charging into the insect swarm. It was time to attack. The spawn's melee war machines were incredibly powerful, especially their charging speed. The mechanical bodies moved like a cheetah, charging rapidly toward the front. Seeing this, Charles immediately commanded his team to follow up and provide support. Let's go. Keep the cover up. The rock-armored gunworms line was disrupted by the licker swarm's attack, but the mutant worm swarm didn't completely lose control. More half-meter-long mutant worm bodies emerged from beneath the thick creep and immediately charged at the spawn's melee units head-on. Here they came. Fang Heng narrowed his eyes. So, this was the creep worm. The creep worm's body was small, its torso color similar to the creep, and its fang-like teeth were exposed, giving it an intimidating appearance. In the center of the battlefield, the spawn's mechanical and the insect swarm collided. Bang! 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 The spawn's melee combat machines unleashed light beams and short blades, instantly slicing through the creep worms like cutting tofu. The battlefield immediately exploded with severed limbs and blood. The creep worms only appeared fierce, but compared to the lickers, they were much weaker and were almost entirely slaughtered by the spawn's machines. Hey! Jane felt a sense of pride. The spawn's mechanical units were incredibly strong in melee combat and were very useful for pushing through. This was the reason he spent a large amount of money on the machines. Charge! Follow me! Jane shouted, leading the Federation soldiers into a full-on charge. The creep rolled, and more creep worms emerged from beneath the surface, with large numbers of them gathering from deep within the creep, directly using their bodies to block the spawn's creatures' charge. Damn! There really were creatures not afraid of dying. Fire! The Federation soldiers entered the optimal shooting range, raising their energy beam weapons to fire at the zombie swarm and increase the firepower output. Jane's eyes glinted coldly. What use was having so many? Bring as many as you want, I'll kill them all. They pushed forward relentlessly. Suddenly, a scout player in the team noticed something unusual to the right and loudly reminded, Captain, there's a large group of rock-armored gunworms approaching quickly at the 3 o'clock position. Our scans show a commander-level mutant worm body among them. Jane's heart skipped a beat. Trouble. The reinforcements included a commander-level monster. There were too many insects here to clear in such a short time. If the reinforcements of rock-armored gunworms reached their defensive lines, casualties were inevitable. No worries, fall back first. They had already gained a lot. They would retreat and regroup, then strike again later to conserve their strength and try to eliminate as many of the swarm as possible. Just as Jane was about to call for a retreat, he heard Fang Heng's voice. Don't worry, leave the cannon beetles to me. Fang Heng's eyes shifted toward the front right of the battlefield, and there was a flash of expectation in them. A commander-level creature. Just what he needed. He still had a large gap in his mission to collect genetic sequences. Perfect timing for some commander-level kills. From the distance, the commander-level armored cannon beetle, along with a large group of mutant worms, was rushing toward the central battlefield to reinforce the swarm. Before they could reach firing range, the ground beneath the creep suddenly exploded. Ka! Ka! A black rift over 10 meters long opened in the creep ground. Whoosh! 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 Hundreds of lickers rushed out from the rift and immediately charged at the rock-armored gunworms swarm. Kai! 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 In an instant, another shower of blood and severed limbs erupted. Dozens of lickers sped toward the commander-level rock-armored gunworms, their sharp mandibles sinking into the leader's tough exterior, and their claws relentlessly attacked. The entire reinforcements of rock-armored gunworms were stopped halfway, thrown into chaos, and unable to move. They actually stopped them? How many summoned creatures did he have? Jane had been ready to retreat, but when he saw that Fang Heng had the swarm tied up, he stopped thinking about anything else and immediately ordered, quick! Take advantage of this. Full force, shoot them down. Federation soldiers, with their energy beam weapons, teamed up with the spawn's melee war machines to mow down the swarm. The insect numbers on the battlefield quickly began to dwindle. Jane, taking a moment, glanced at the commander-level mutant worm among the reinforcements. His face showed some shock. In just 2 minutes, the commander-level creature had been completely devoured by Fang Heng's summoned creatures. The licker swarm, after dealing with the reinforcements of rock-armored gunworms, once again burrowed underground, waiting to ambush other armored cannon beetle lines. Chapter 2884, Reckless. After a preliminary test, Fang Heng had already figured it out. The insect swarm's front line looked fine at first glance, but in reality, it was only sufficient to deal with the Federation. Relying on the stealth ability of the lickers, as long as they broke through the insect swarm's defense line, most of the mutant worms in the swarm would not be able to break the lickers' defense. What was there to be afraid of? Just charge ahead. Go. After clearing the creep worms, Jane and Charles' teams joined forces and quickly advanced toward the central sea-level insect nest. Charles was also shocked and asked, "Where did you call the reinforcements from?" "Hee, it's a secret." Jane chuckled and controlled the spawn worm machines to continue advancing. At this moment, the soldiers realized that Fang Heng's summoned creatures were even more terrifying than they had imagined. The summoned creatures had already spread out and infiltrated the ground, attacking from below and breaking through the defense net laid out by the rock-armored gun worms. The Federation soldiers were still behind, far away from the licker swarm, dealing with the creep and scattered plague mothers. Though the team seemed somewhat disjointed, in reality, Fang Heng's lickers had already suppressed the rock-armored gun worms, throwing them into chaos. The long-range firepower of the insect swarm was completely suppressed. The Federation soldiers hardly had to worry about long-range attacks, simply moving forward steadily, using beam weapons to clear the creep and plague mothers along the way. Just as Jane led the team to fire and clear the creep, the ground ahead, covered by the creep, suddenly showed strange ripples. The creep? Upon closer inspection, layers of wriggling movements appeared in the crevice, with many high-tier mutant worm bodies spilling out from it. Creep worms. A dense mass of them, and even a large number of elite and commander-level creep worms, suddenly erupted, spilling out from under the creep and rushing toward the licker swarm at the front from all directions. Jane suddenly felt a tingling sensation on her scalp. So many. Wasn't it said that there weren't many creep worms? And this was just a sea-level insect nest. The captain and the others who were dealing with the A-level insect nest couldn't even imagine how terrifying that would be. The next moment, the creep worms rushed toward the more than 100 lickers that were attacking the rock-armored gun worms, quickly overwhelming them. Fang Heng was also surprised to see so many creep worms suddenly appear. He muttered to himself, "Hey, so it's purely relying on numbers for suppression." Jane's federal team watched as the creep worms quickly overwhelmed the lickers and rock-armored gun worms along the way, rapidly advancing toward them. Under the beam weapons' fire, large numbers of creep worms fell, but more continued to crawl over their fallen comrades. As the distance between them narrowed, the soldiers grew increasingly tense, beads of sweat forming on their foreheads. It was over. They couldn't hold them off. Jane and Charles exchanged a glance and were about to retreat. Huh? What? Suddenly, about 300 meters ahead of the Federation team, the ground trembled slightly, and the creep showed fine cracks. Kai. Kai. Jane's face changed. More creatures, just as dense as before, crawled out from the cracks. Fang Heng summoned creatures. There were even more. The licker swarm did not attack immediately after emerging from the ground but quickly formed a long defensive line on the spot. As over 4,000 lickers gathered, they charged forward in unison, rushing toward the creep worm swarm. Bang! 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 The mutant worms collided violently in the center of the battlefield, exploding into bloody mist. The pungent smell of blood made the soldiers' hearts tighten. A series of game hints appeared in Fang Heng's retina. Ding! The player's zombie clone, modified licker form, kills a creep worm. Ding! The player's zombie clone, modified licker form, kills a creep worm. Ding! The player's zombie clone, modified licker form, kills a creep worm. Leader. Ding! Detected creature, creep worm, mutated, has a modifiable branch option for the player. Modifiable branch option, creep adaptation. Description for modification. After modification, the creature becomes more adept at moving in the creep domain, gaining an additional 30% movement speed, 30% attack speed, and a 30% increase in all attributes. The creature can enter a hidden state in the creep domain, unable to move but can hide its aura and reduce all incoming damage by 80%, while healing 2000% faster. Additional description for modification. After modification, the zombie clone gains the special form of a creep tower. This form cannot receive any fusion evolution. This form has an additional 200% HP and 200% HP regeneration speed, but it cannot move or attack. In this state, the creature can gradually spread creep in a 60 by 60 domain. Ding! The player needs to kill elite or higher level creatures to obtain genetic information and activate genetic modification. Current genetic acquisition percentage, 0.37%. Fang Heng's pupils suddenly contracted. Creep modification. This was a great thing. Upon closer inspection, the modification enhanced combat power by 30% in the creep environment, and it could also hide directly in the creep. The hidden effect of the creep was excellent. Even his strong perception and blood sense could not detect the hidden creep worms beneath the creep. However, the creep modification required cooperation with the creep tower form to create a creep domain, which was more suited for a defensive battle. Fang Heng quickly thought. This was a very outstanding enhancement effect. If properly coordinated, these skills could create a terrifying effect greater than the sum of their parts. Unfortunately, the seed of Ouroboros level was still not high enough to fuse all the modifications. For now, he decided to focus on unlocking the modification branch. Fang Heng shifted his gaze from the game hints back to the battlefield. Kill. More and more lickers crawled out from the ground and pounced toward the central battlefield. They actually blocked them. Behind them, the Federation soldiers looked at the insect swarm fighting ahead, feeling a chill run down their spines. The terrifying summoned creatures. They had reached the point where they were crushing the creep worms. Even the commander-level creep worms could hardly gain any advantage over the lickers. At most, they were just knocked away by the larger commander-level creatures. After landing, the lickers quickly recovered and joined the fight. It was almost a one-sided massacre. The number of creep worms was rapidly decreasing, and the creep worms couldn't cause any damage to the lickers. Chapter 2885, Cleaning Up. Half an hour later. In the shipyard area. The transport drones were still coming and going continuously, shuttling between the catacombs outside the ship and the ship's warehouse, pushing boxes of energy crystals into the warehouse storage area. The soldier in charge of the storage came to Khalid's side and reported, "Captain, the rear holds crystal or storage area is already full." Khalid had just dealt with a few officers looking for Fang Heng. Hearing that the supplies were already full, he felt a headache coming on. He rubbed his throbbing temples and said, "I understand. Pile them up in temporary warehouse number 7 for now." "Captain." "Yes. Temporary warehouse number 7 is already full." Khalid was surprised and said, "Already full?" "Yes, warehouses number 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 13 are all full." "What? Already? All of them?" Khalid, hearing this, instinctively looked toward the ship's deck outside and furrowed his brows. Good heavens, were there that many ores? "We've got enough energy ore for now." "Let's pause for a moment," the soldier said, standing still with a helpless expression. The spawn transport robots weren't under their control and couldn't be stopped. They could only watch as the energy crystals continued to board the ship. Khalid saw the soldier standing there at a loss and quickly realized this. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it, do this instead. Pile the extra ore boxes outside the ship. We'll wait for the captain to return before deciding what to do." "Yes." In Area C's insect nest battlefield. Fang Heng had no idea that he had made a miscalculation. Although the zombie clones mined the ores quickly, the Federation ships consumed energy crystals at a limited rate. This was different from when they were farming spirit gemstones before. On the spawn side, they took as many spirit gemstones as they could get. But the Federation side, with so many energy crystals, quickly reached a point where they couldn't consume them all. At this point, the licker swarm had successfully entered the depths of the insect nest and was dealing with the C-tier insect nest mother spider. "So it's 2 of them," Jane murmured as he looked ahead at the 2 C-tier insect nest mother spiders, only about 10 meters apart. No wonder the mission difficulty was so high, they had really drawn the jackpot. A large number of mutated elite-level mutant worms, along with regular mutant worms, formed defensive lines around the insect nest mother spiders. The lickers had used their stealth skill to approach from the ground, launching an attack from beneath the surface. They directly engaged in melee combat with their powerful flesh and blood, thoroughly disrupting the formation. The battlefield resembled a giant meat grinder. Even Jane didn't dare to let the mechanical spawn battle units he had hired at great cost join the battlefield. It was too bloody. At that moment, Jane suddenly realized that Boyd's earlier words had no exaggeration. Fang Heng was incredibly strong. The licker swarm had used their tough flesh to block the insect swarm's ranged attacks. Jane even felt that, without their help, Fang Heng could slowly grind down the entire C-tier insect nest by himself. Go. 2 Federation teams launched a full suppression of firepower. With continuous blasts from beam weapons, chunks of foul-smelling flesh and blood fell from the insect nest mother spiders. It wasn't until the 2 insect nest mother spiders' health was completely depleted. The blood and flesh on the mother spiders, entangled on the crimson crystals, rapidly fell off, and the nearby creep shriveled away, revealing cracked earth below. Ding! The player killed 2 C-tier insect nest mother spiders, mutated leaders. The player gained 2,000 contribution points 2 and 2,000 honor points 2. Ding! The player successfully cleared 2 C-tier insect nests. The player gained 10,000 contribution points 2 and 10,000 honor points 2. Ding! The player's honor level has risen to Recruit S, Sequence Level 1. It was quite a good reward. Fang Heng glanced at the game prompt and nodded to himself. Including the extra 50,000 contribution points promised by Jane, the efficiency was just slightly slower than large-scale mining. It was still within an acceptable range. But his honor level had risen so slowly, hadn't it? Up to now, he was still just a recruit? He had only reached the S level in the recruit tier. Seeing that the battle was coming to an end, Jane walked over to Fang Heng. Fang Heng, I won't say too much thanks, but I heard you're interested in Crimson Gemstones. We'll leave the gemstones to you, though I can't guarantee what new orders the captain might have later. Okay. Fang Heng thought to himself that there was no need to worry. The Crimson Gemstones would soon be completely dismantled by the zombie clones. Mission completed smoothly. We'll choose to return soon. What about you? Will you be coming back with us? Yeah, I'll come back with you. Fang Heng also planned to return to the ship to check on the ore collection situation. Just as he was about to catch a ride, Lieutenant Charles walked over. With the insect nest mother spider destroyed, the Federation's satellite communication system had been restored, and Charles successfully contacted the ship's communication. Charles handed Fang Heng the communicator and said, Fang Heng, Lieutenant Galit urgently wants to contact you. He wants to have a conversation. Galit? Oh, right, he was the officer in charge of the warehouse. Fang Heng connected the name with the person and took the communicator. Hello? Is this Fang Heng? It is. This is Galit. There's something I need to discuss with you about your ore. After listening to Galit's explanation, Fang Heng fell into silence for a long time. So, he had miscalculated. The Federation didn't need that many energy crystals at all. Hello? Fang Heng, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Fang Heng paused and still asked, somewhat unwilling, do you need any other special ores? Galit seemed somewhat stunned by Fang Heng's question. No, we haven't found any mining areas for spirit ore in this world, and the Federation doesn't currently need any other ores. Crap. He had planned to farm ores to grind contribution points. I understand, thank you. Fang Heng scratched his head and handed the communicator back. Jane saw the strange look on Fang Heng's face and couldn't help but ask, what's wrong, Fang Heng? Did you run into some trouble? No, nothing. Fang Heng quickly adjusted his mood and said, ran into a little issue, but it's not a big deal. I won't return to the ship with you guys. Alright. Jane looked up and nodded as she saw the transport ship approaching. Fang Heng, thanks again for your help. If you need anything, feel free to come find me anytime. Of course. Fang Heng watched as Jane and Charles led their team of Federation soldiers away, then stroked his chin. Alright. It seemed that he would have to change his strategy for grinding contribution points. Since he couldn't farm ores, he would have to tackle the insect nests head-on. Compared to mining, farming insect nests was slower and riskier, but there were benefits. For example, he could earn contribution points while also increasing his honor level with the spawns, unlocking more personal exchange items. Chapter 2886, Remnants. Fang Heng opened the world map on the surveying instrument. The entire world had been explored, and the Federation's main forces were engaged in combat in Area A, where insect nests were densely concentrated. This area was extremely tense, with insect nests scattered all over. Should he go help the Federation in Area A? Not really. This was a paid job. If he went there just to help for free, how could he charge for his services in the future? Moreover, if he cleared out the insect nests, the Federation's transport missions would be gone. That wouldn't do. He was counting on the transport missions to make some profit, and he could also use the opportunity to promote his insect nest clearing service. It would be a win-win. So, this key area had to be left alone for now. He decided to clean up scattered insect nests in other areas and set up the zombie clone hack routes. It would be a bit of a hassle, but the efficiency wasn't much slower than mining. Hey, Fang Heng thought greedily, heading toward the catacombs. In the central war zone, the A-level insect nests encountered here were completely different from the C and D-level ones Fang Heng had previously faced. The resistance level of the insect swarms in this area was terrifyingly high, and there were even numerous scattered C and D-level insect nests in the domain. The number of insect swarms here was incomparable to the lower-tier insect nests. As for the combat forces, the A-level insect nest not only had the rock-armored gunworms set up on the outer perimeter as a defensive line, but also had the creepline worm formations, along with the more troublesome sickle-head larvae. The sickle-head larvae were tiny, mostly the size of a fingernail, and could quickly climb forward on the ground. Normal beam weapons couldn't target them properly and could only shoot at the ground, relying on splash damage to eliminate the larvae. Even so, there was still a chance for the larvae to slip through the explosive blast zones and break into the players' lines. Once they got into the team, the sickle-head larvae would climb up the soldiers' bodies, tear through their protective suits with their sharp mandibles, cut into the skin, and then burrow into the soldiers' bodies, severing their nervous systems and killing them. Though small, they were extremely deadly. The combination of ranged and melee mutant worms, along with the elusive sickle-head larvae and overwhelming numbers, made the insect swarm much harder to deal with. And that was just the outer perimeter. Deeper into Area A, more troublesome elite mutated insect worms awaited. The battle was only going to get tougher. Captain Gorn had set up a fuel line in front of the team to block the sickle-head larvae using a 3-layer firewall of burning fuel. However, the flames also interfered with the player's vision, making it difficult to threaten the rock-armored gunworms behind the line. In the chaos, they were also at risk of counterattacks from the gunworm swarm. After several back-and-forth pulls, Captain Gorn lost his temper. By the time the backup team arrived, Gorn, along with more than 10 severely wounded soldiers, retreated back to the ship for recovery. While waiting for the regeneration of his team, Captain Gorn needed to deal with various incidents on the ship, check the status of other teams, and quickly adapt to battlefield changes. His secretary handed him a stack of neatly organized reports. "Captain, here are the latest battle reports and requests for decisions from the past few hours." "Good, put them over here." Gorn didn't immediately look at the requests but picked up a key battle report. Boyd and Jane's teams had done quite well, managing to eliminate 1 D-level and 1 C-level insect nest in such a short time. Interesting. With their strength, it shouldn't have been possible to finish the mission so quickly. Could there be a change in the mutant worms? Gorn thought for a moment and then opened the detailed battle reports from Boyd and Jane. Apart from a small section of credit for their achievements, both reports mentioned Fang Heng. That guy? Gorn immediately thought of Fang Heng. The player who had been recommended by Teacher Benny. Wasn't he from the logistics team? When did he go to the front lines? And how did he become so powerful? Frowning, Gorn looked up and asked, "Where is Fang Heng now?" "We're not sure. He came back a few times before but left quickly. We don't know where he went, and since Fang Heng doesn't have our military department's communicator, we can't contact him." "What do you think about Fang Heng's request for the Crimson Crystal?" "It's strange. According to the lab feedback, the Crimson Crystal doesn't have development value. Maybe he has a special use for it. If we force him to eliminate the Crimson Crystal, we might have a conflict with him." The secretary thought carefully and nodded. "If we don't need Fang Heng's help, we don't need to worry about it too much and can just send someone to remove the leftover crystals. Alright, let's put this matter aside for now. We'll decide when the captain is available." "Report. Come in." A soldier rushed into the room and reported, "Sir, there's been an unusual counterattack from the insect swarm. The captain has ordered all standby teams to go to the front line for defense." Gorn's heart skipped a beat. He stared at the soldier and asked, "Is it Charlene's team in trouble?" "It's from deep within the insect nest. It's probably related to Charlene's team, but the specific situation is unclear for now." The soldier continued, "Also, the 4th batch of prism defensive towers from the spawns has arrived through the transition passage. We need personnel to escort them and handle the subsequent construction of the prism defense line." Gorn listened and clenched his fists. This special mission had originally been assigned to the Black Castle team, but due to major unforeseen circumstances, Black Castle was now stuck with the insect swarms and wouldn't be able to make it. The prism defense line was their key weapon for turning the tide against the mutant worms. It could not fail. Link to the mainframe and issue the mission, inviting other allied spawns to join. Colette will be responsible for it and will make sure to keep an eye on it. The defense line must be completed within 7 days. Understood. Gather the troops and prepare to head to area for reinforcement. Yes. The next day, Fang Heng logged into the game again. He had spent quite a bit of effort setting up the zombie team's monster clearing route the previous day, and after finishing, he had felt tired and logged off early to rest. Now it was time to check the results of his hack. Fang Heng flipped through the game log. Ding! The player killed the D-level insect nest mother spider, mutant leader, and received 500 spawn contribution points and 500 spawn honor points. Ding! The player successfully cleared the D-level insect nest and received 3,000 spawn contribution points and 3,000 spawn honor points. Ding! The player's honor level has increased to Guard D, Sequence Level 3. It was satisfying enough. Before logging off, he had preset the liquor hack route for clearing insect nests, and so far, it had cleared quite a bit. His personal honor level had finally reached Sequence Level 3. Chapter 2887, Network Construction for the Liquor Group. Without a commander, giving vague instructions to clear nests could only handle D-level insect nests. To tackle C-level insect nests, either dozens of lickers would need to be deployed, or the commander himself would have to take charge. In order to go offline for full automated grinding, Fang Heng had to sacrifice some efficiency by dividing the lickers into more than 10 groups to farm separately. The results were decent. After all, grinding is not as effective as manual control. Fang Hang thought about returning to the ship's mainframe to check if there were more items available for exchange with his level 3 honor points. While continuing to grind D-level insect nests and complete transport missions, he also promoted his insect nest clearing services to the Federation. Soon, Fang Hang returned to the mainframe area of the ship, quickly browsing his personal exchange column. The available items were still pitifully few. Compared to the first-tier sequence, there were just a few more single-soldier combat equipment. They were relatively expensive, and their effects were average. For him, they were practically useless. As for the Black Fog Crystal Core he really needed, it was nowhere to be found. It seemed he would have to continue grinding,